The name of the former leader of Transcendental Meditation, it's probably Mahesh Prasad Varma. This is a bit hazy. Mahesh controlled his image tight, so you bet your sweet Bippy that no one was calling him anything other than Great Seer, or rather Maharishi. Maha means great, Rishi means seer, Maharishi means great seer. Maharishi and Yogi are both titles. Yogi means master of yoga. Mahesh had a last name called Srivastava, but dropped it instantly because it pointed to his low caste. Mahesh was maybe born wealthy, maybe poor, maybe in 1918, maybe 1911. It depends upon who you talk to. He had siblings and a nephew, and that being Ganesh Varma. The reason we don't know much about Mahesh is because he renounced everything to become a monk. Before Mahesh rubbed shoulders with the Beatles, Mahesh was in a physics classroom in 1942. In the physics classroom, I assume, he would have learned about a man named Albert Einstein. Now, even you could tell me that matter is made of like particles and like atoms and like junk. But what Einstein posed was an idea that all the particles were held together in one field. He called this the unified field theory.
The unified field. The unity of all the particles and all the forces in manifestation. Unified field. Oneness.
Later, Mahesh would fill the role of a secretary at Jyotir Monastery in India, studying Advaita Vedanta or Hindu non-dualism. Most likely, this is what happened. Mahesh would take what he learned in the physics classroom and applied it to what he was studying in the monastery. This would be the impetus for the science of creative intelligence. The cosmic body, that is everything, is God in Mahesh's religion. The unified field theory is the proof that everything is one cosmic body. This newfangled modern science was really just ancient Vedic science rediscovered. Well, time passes slowly, and the head of the monastery, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, or rather Guru Dev, dies. When Guru Dev dies, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi resigns himself to a cave for 2 years and meditates. He comes out and ventures off as a teacher for what was then called the spiritual regeneration movement. The meditation he was charging for was called Transcendental Deep Meditation. Mahesh allegedly forged his master's will so he could elect an unfavorable candidate that he was close to the head of the monastery. This was so Mahesh could gain political favor among others at the monastery.
A second will was produced, one that did not name Kalpatru. There was allegations that it was a forgery. There was allegations that Gurudev himself had been poisoned. There was a pretty heavy atmosphere in Varanasi. Fairly soon, Maharishi left town.
The first person he initiated into the movement called him Maharishi, and I guess the name just kind of stuck.
Refueling operations are simplified considerably by use of an underwing single-point adapter.
When we were on these long meditation courses in Europe, Maharishi encouraged people to go into silence. And we would just put this little badge, we would wear a little badge that says silence, so that people wouldn't try to engage us in conversation. So I really loved silence. I had some blissful, wonderful experiences from meditation. I love silence. So I went into silence one time. That was in La Antilla, Spain. And I did not utter a sound from my mouth for 4 months. So I went into silence for 4 months. And I went into silence at other times for a week or two at a time. There was one time I went into my room for 2 weeks and never came out, didn't talk to anyone.
Ready for takeoff.
The yogi spent the majority of his career building up centers, training teachers and monks. He wrote books and gave lectures. In a short time span, he became a minor celebrity. With the swift tongue, he is able to make people cut checks with ease, be it socialite, heiress, or B-movie star. He knew his marks, and he knew how to exploit them. He flies commercial to Europe, bringing meditation with him. Meditation wasn't viewed like it was today. Dr. Herbert Benson had yet to study it scientifically. It's easy to see how Maharishi could have been popular. After all, he brought to what many people in the West saw as magic. But it wasn't just that. He sold religion in a language Westerners could understand, the language of commodity. It's here he changes the name of the spiritual regeneration movement to International Meditation Society to Transcendental Meditation. It would later be TM for short. In 1959, Maharishi touches down his private jet to America. The plane touches down at Norway, down at Switzerland, down at England. He holds talks with friends. Half a world away, another plane hits the tarmac. It's the Beatles. It's the year 1963. Beatlemania is here. The fifth man that leaves the plane is Brian Epstein. He's like a father figure to the boys. The group is very close. They perform live. David Lynch, then a teenager who wants to be a painter more than anything in the world, misses them on the Ed Sullivan Show. Maharishi is seen as a curiosity, but people do take notice. His books sell 1 million copies. He builds a center in Oxford, Spain, Netherlands. The Maharishi walked like a man with Brahman. He dressed in purifying white, his hair flowing long with a prop flower always in his hands. He used this flower to speak of abstract metaphors of the nature of being. The Mailu of the presentations are sometimes lit in ethereal lighting, the camera centered dead on the yogi's face, his message inescapable from the viewer. There's a sense of ceremony. A man would place a deerskin on the chair where the Maharishi sat. Someone would set out some fresh flowers for him. The set looks similar to a royal court or a caricature of an old Indian garden. There he would drip feed his message of bliss, love, and God realization. Mahesh sold himself as someone very down to earth. He was always laughing, counter to the culture of the rigidity of religious institutions. Mahesh was selling enlightenment, but first he was selling happiness. When he would sit down, he would giggle. The crowd would laugh along. Maharishi's book would be translated into another 12 languages that year. Those who knew Maharishi kept remnants of their former guru. In interviews on TV, he looks humble and wise. When you get people to speak about the yogi and their relationship with him, they speak of love-bombing sessions and then a sharp turn into ruthlessness. 1963, 3 months after John Lennon's wife Cynthia gives birth, John Lennon would take a trip to Barcelona with Brian Epstein, but stops short of having sex with him. The intimacy of the trip would never be rekindled. On the set of Help in 1964, George Harrison hears Indian music, and a man gives each of the Beatles a book on reincarnation. George Harrison would relate his interest in Indian music to his mother, as she told him she played this type of music on the radio during her pregnancy. It's 1965, and George Harrison puts the Indian sitar in Rubber Soul, and John Lennon takes inspiration from Eastern esoteric philosophy in 1966, dropping acid to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. There was a religious mania surrounding the Beatles. People ripped their clothes, displayed deity-like worship, and approached them with the belief that they could heal people. One fan was a young Scientologist by the name of Charles Manson. While in jail, he learned the guitar because he hoped to become a part of the group. When the Beatles played, stadiums resembled a Pentecostal church. It was hard to even play, the screaming was so loud. In 1966, the band was more popular than Jesus. At least, John Lennon thought so. Same year, Time ran an article, "Is God Dead?" Science was overtaking religion. The youth were questioning authority. So what's religion to do? Evangelical Christians burned Beatles albums and shunned minorities, so that's one way of handling things. Maharishi hits the talk show circuit while David Lynch marries Peggy Reevey and has Jennifer Lynch. For David Lynch, a major religious change comes from this pivotal moment in his life, and most of his art surrounds being a father. Capitalizing on Maharishi's success, Jerry Jarvis, his first-in-command, helps found SIMS, which is the Student International Meditation Society. Maharishi expands into college lecture halls. Here, he first finds the importance of education as a means of propaganda. In the lecture halls, he meets the counterculture. George Harrison's wife saw the Maharishi in a lecture, which led the Beatles to get their mantra in 1967. All their mantras are the same. It's Ram. Mia and Prudence is most likely Sure Ram. This mantra would also be the name of an album by Paul McCartney in 1970. In 1967, Mahatma Gandhi, Lahira Mayasaya, Paramahansa Yogananda, Maha Avatar Babji, Yukataswar Giri, Aldous Huxley, Carl Jung, Aleister Crowley all grace the cover of Sgt. Pepper's. The Beatles take their name particularly from the Beats and the Beat Generation, which was heavily influenced by Eastern religion. The counterculture would seek out alternative frameworks of religion in hopes to gain liberty and find self-fulfillment. In those I have talked to, there's often family problems, sometimes with how the family views religion. I often hear of parents taking orthodox stances on religion. Drugs were advertised by figures of the counterculture, such as Timothy Leary, as a pathway to enlightenment, but once doing LSD for enlightenment, many had bad trips. The intersection between counterculture of the 60s and transcendental meditation made its way for many celebrity endorsements. When people entered TM seeking something outside their normal religious frameworks, they instead found themselves in very similar power structures. They seeked out a place that would take care of them like a parent, only to find themselves in a group where they served someone else. Mia Farrow was a free spirit from a devout Catholic background. She sat in a lecture hall on January 22, 1968. 3 years before, her brother died in a plane crash. 2 years before, her father died from a heart attack. She had gotten a divorce from Frank Sinatra just a few weeks prior. He was 44 and she was 21. Not too long before, June 1967, the Beatles beat the naysayers. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club was at the top of the charts. The day the Beatles met the Maharishi, their band manager, Brian Epstein, was found dead. It was August 27, 1967. He overdosed on an acute combination of barbiturates and alcohol. John Lennon had given him his first dose, which led to his addiction. The Beatles agreed to go to India to follow a strange man to escape the confusion and chaos of their lives. Shortly after the Beatles finished Magical Mystery Tour, Maharishi was calling himself the Beatles guru on his albums. This was without the permission of the Beatles. The Beatles, thinking meditation was good, overlooked this. Meanwhile, a fan from Greece, the charismatic Magic Alex, hung onto John Lennon like a leech. He invented stuff. He made a box with flashing lights that John Lennon would stare at while high on LSD. Alex would follow them to India.
Hello, I'm Alexis from Apple Electronics. I would like to say hello to all my brothers around the world and to all the girls around the world and to all the electronic people around the world. That is Apple Electronics.
During this time in India, the Beatles got word of the Maharishi's ties to right-wing politicians. They didn't look into it. Rishikesh, India was in pretty much total isolation. The group arrived in early February 1968. Curiously, Maharishi had already been paying for Mia and her sister Prudence's sightseeing tours and first-class plane rides. When the Beatles arrived, Maharishi had them where he wanted them and spared no expense in keeping them there. The place was massive, funded by Maharishi's first major roup, a rich tobacco heiress. There he treated the guests to his personal masseuse and 24-hour chefs who cooked gourmet vegetarian cuisine. The Beatles were surprised by the wealth. He was more rock star than Yogi. Once there, the Beatles were kept there to their rooms. They were kept in trance states for long periods. Robert J. Lifton's 8 Criteria of Thought Reform in TM from the Lived Experiences of Gina Catena, Part 4. Confession. Gina Catena says forced confessions are used by a variety of cultic groups. TM does not aggressively employ this method of thought reform. She also alleges that TM employs this tactics on applications for advanced courses and for public sharings of experiences with Maharishi. She also alleges that on applications for advanced courses, an applicant must essentially prove emotional stability by stating that he or she never had need for therapy or other forms of external support outside of the TM organization. It is also important to state that one does not abuse drugs or alcohol. The nature of the application and desirability of acceptance to advanced courses often encourage a person to lie about external associations. Applications often lie, denying marital counseling or other involvement. On the other hand, I know of many individuals who avoided seeking help because they feared being ostracized from advanced programs. She also alleges that TM teachings deny validity of psychotherapy. Confessing one's inner insecurities and goals comes close to true therapy and is thus officially avoided with TM. Okay. The more you do meditation in one sitting, the more you are susceptible to adverse side effects. This can be unhealthy, but due to a lack of people doing this, it's often not discussed, and those who do this often think this is a connection to God, which often prevents conversations surrounding mental health. In this section, we are going to talk about long-term meditation. As far as I am aware, 20 minutes twice a day, which is like 40 minutes in total, is relatively benign, but some issues may arise. Extended meditation can have major complications, though. Water is good. Too much water can cause water poisoning, but that doesn't mean I have anything against drinking water. So, same rule applies. Maharishi speaks of the process in which a person becomes enlightened, like washing a cloth in dye. If you dip a white cloth in yellow dye, it doesn't immediately turn yellow. So coloring the mind and fading it, and coloring and fading meditation and action, this is a procedure where stabilizing the unbounded awareness of the level of conscious mind, and once it's done forever. The color will never fade. According to survivor Joseph Kellett, it's common for people to do rounding. Rounding involves alternating periods of meditation with periods of doing the stretching exercises called asanas that most people think of as yoga. For example, in the morning, you may induce trance, meditate, then do some yoga asanas. Then you would go to a lecture which introduces TM dogma that is a bit more advanced than what you have been taught already. Then you go to lunch. Then another dogma lecture. Then perhaps you do 2 more rounds in the afternoon. Then another lecture. Then dinner. Then another lecture. And then off to bed. My contact at MIU states they are locked into meditating 20 minutes 2 times a day, which is 40 minutes. During something called forest retreats, which are isolated meeting sessions not held in a forest, but rather in student rooms at the Maharishi University, people are asked to round twice during meetings. But my contact at the Maharishi International University says that they are encouraged to do rounds as many times as they can. They say, it's very uncomfortable, and I've been bringing it up for the past 2 years, but they kept telling me good things are happening, that I'm relieving stress, all that good stuff. If I could have $1 for every time someone told me good things are happening, I would be rich. They also knew of 3 cases of students that had to go to the psych wards within their dorms just in the past year. They also told me every time we speak up on mental health, we get offered check-ins and are gaslighted. They also told me that there were no side effects, that there was no qualified mental health staff on site. There are many issues and no one is listening.
But I just want to say from my experience at former TMers, they were told me that they were told that when they reported these negative effects of meditation, they were told they were just unstressing, do more of it.
Yes.
As opposed to stop, or it may not work for you, try something else. They were kind of in a very ideologically rigid way.
Oh yes, and they're discouraged.
This is what you need to do.
Yeah, and discouraged from seeking help from mental health practitioners.
So there was one time when Maharishi was angry at me and he told me to go and round, which is probably the thing that I love to do the most. But he said it to me as though he was scolding me, as he was sending me, because he was sending me somewhere to go do that. And so I wouldn't be near him. I'd be going round, go somewhere and round. So that was my punishment.
And so
Just a little ironic.
Mhm. So how long did you round for?
I think that time it was probably 6 weeks. Usually they were 6-week courses.
Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's master sat by a raging beehive for 40 years and meditated all day. I've met people who got in near-death car wrecks and repeated their mantra, and they were also able to escape the pain. Meditation is excellent, and serious health problems rarely occur for the average person. Adverse side effects of meditation is the exception and not the rule. And if people have headaches, that's not the end of the world and is not what I'm worried about. Long-term meditation has been cited in seminal works of cultic research. According to Dr. Stephen Hassan, in combating cult mind control, people indoctrinated to perform excessive hours-long meditation or chanting techniques daily can be psychologically and physiologically addicted to the mind control techniques. Such mind stilling generates strong releases of brain chemicals, which cause not only a dissociative mental state, but also a high similar to that created by illegal drugs. A person recruited into the organization such as Transcendental Meditation, TM, might suffer such negative effects as headaches, insomnia, increased anxiety, and so forth. Since TM members believe that their form of meditation is good for everybody, a person who complains of negative effects may be told that he is simply unstressing and should continue meditating. Unfortunately, the results of ignoring such problems may lead to serious health problems, nervous breakdowns, and even suicidal tendencies.
I used to meditate for long periods of time. In fact, even when the Beatles were there with Maharishi in Rishikesh, they meditated up to 8 hours a day. And I went to, the first retreat I went to was in Asilmar, and that was in 1967. And it was led by Jerry Jarvis, who was my TM teacher. And people were in competition there to see who could meditate the longest. So when we would go to the meetings, he would ask us, how long did you meditate today? And people would raise their hands, at 12 hours, 13 hours, And then somebody went, it was 20 hours, So I tried to meditate many hours myself. So I meditated up to, I'd say, 18 hours at one sitting.
In my opinion, TM doesn't perceive meditation through modern-day psychology. They perceive it religiously and use scientific-sounding language to disguise this religiosity. To them, Maharishi was a scientist of Hinduism, or what they deem to be a Vedic scientist. When they see the brain, they see Ganesh. There are adverse side effects to TM. There are adverse side effects to every single meditation practice in known existence. Meditation, like many practices, has its benefits and potential drawbacks. Prudence Farrow's experience of meditating for long periods is chronicled in the song Dear Prudence by the Beatles. Lennon asks her to open her eyes and see the sunny skies, but it ends there, outside her door. During her meditation, she saw what she thought was the devil. She needed medical care, but the Maharishi didn't want to take her to the hospital to save face from any leering press. She turned out all right and is still with the movement. Paul McCartney's oneness with nature and bliss is chronicled in Mother Nature's Son. He wrote that song while meditating. But John Lennon's suicidal ideations due to long-term meditation is chronicled in Your Blues. Mike Love of the Beach Boys was afraid of knives. During long bouts of meditation, he felt like he was being stabbed. He meditated through this and overcame this fear. In this situation, moving through discomfort can sometimes lead to personal growth and healing. However, it's your body. It's not up to any authority figure to tell you, no, you are de-stressing. This pain is actually good, actually.
Drop, drop. But there is no water.
There was a time when Maharishi put me and 2 other women in charge of meditation casualties. And some of them were very strange. One of them was a woman who thought she was flying, and she was spending her time flying around and up on the ceiling, and that she was levitating like that. There were others who had strange things happen to them. One was a guy who could not speak. He literally stopped speaking. And Maharishi he'd be standing there on the line with other meditators while Maharishi walked by, and Maharishi would say to him, "Speak, speak," when he went to them, but he didn't say anything. And there was a woman who would be dancing. She'd do these strange movements. She'd be her arms, and she would go into these strange movements all the time. So those were a couple people that Maharishi had me taking care of and escorting them to the next place we were going to, because we couldn't send them home. They weren't in a state that they could be put onto a plane. So there were some of those people, and other people who had various psychotic breaks. There was one man who did some very strange thing. He went into there was a woman that he was obsessed with, and he went into her room and he cut out all the crotches from her underwear. And I think he lit them on fire or something. Meditation for me, I only had fantastic experiences, but there were people who committed suicide. There were people who had really bad influences from doing these long, long meditations.
The Beatles wrote the White Album when they had nothing to do. They felt creative in these meditative states. They learned what David Lynch would call catching fish or catching ideas. TM doesn't show you how to do this, they just teach meditation. But essentially you meditate, and if a thought comes to your head, you cease meditating and write it down. 28 songs were written by the time they left the compound. 28 songs. Most of these songs can be found on the White Album.
In the last 40 years, there has never been a single study conducted at any major university or research institution and published in any significant scientific journal that has ever shown transcendental meditation to produce anything other than positive effects.
Okay, so the first statement is a non-statement because the qualifiers are major university and significant scientific journal. It's up to Bobby Roth to tell us what is significant and what is major. However, he goes on to say,
there's never been a study showing that transcendental meditation has any harmful side effects in any way, shape, or form, and this is very important.
Michael Persinger states individuals who practice TM frequently report experiences that are reminiscent of complex partial seizures. Sustained practice of TM can lead to enduring neurophysiological disorders. Such adverse side effects include sensory hallucinations, profound emotional states, and altered perceptions of reality. The study found significant correlations between the number of years practicing transcendental meditation and the occurrence of complex partial epileptic-like signs, including experiences such as feeling vibrations, hearing their name called, encountering paranormal phenomena, finding profound meaning in poetry and prose, and having religious experiences. Arnold Lazarus chronicles a serious suicide attempt in his paper on transcendental meditation in 1974. He says, "This is not a panacea. In fact, when used indiscriminately, there are clinical indications that the procedure can precipitate serious psychiatric problems such as depression, agitation, and even schizophrenic decompensation." Getting back to Rishikesh, Ringo Starr left. He missed his kids. The bugs were too much for his wife, and the food wasn't to his liking. And Maharishi says, we effortlessly return to the mantra.
If you're having bad reactions, they say that's good, you're unstressing, keep doing it.
Is that what transcendental meditation says?
I'm afraid so.
Well, when you say bad reactions, how so?
Tics, headaches, barking like a dog.
There's never been a study showing that transcendental meditation has any harmful side effects.
No one should be barking like a dog. The German government funded a study on the Transcendental Meditation Organization. This led the organization to be characterized as a cult by the German government. The greatest weakness of the German study is two things. One, its sample size, and two, it's from the 1980s. This means we should judge it in the past tense, but know that these frameworks could very well influence the TM of today. The German study makes up for its small sample size with deep sociological data. It was concerned with larger ramifications of the group, not only its practitioner, but those closest to them. Those analyzed were either former members of inner TM or married to or parents of inner TMers. So that means they may have been flyers or teachers or into SCI. There were 30 parents questioned, there was 10 married partners questioned, there was 27 ex-meditators questioned. These ex-meditators and families of meditators reported that 20% meditated up to 2 hours, 25% meditated up to 4 hours, 22% up to 6 hours, and one for more than 8 hours daily. The parents split between strict and lenient. Most were middle to upper class. The TMers initially had good family relationships. The initiates were almost all relatively young. 47% were 18 to 25 when they started. Some were children, which was 17%. Most were introduced to TM through a family member, which was like 54%. 56% became meditators in hopes of less stress and a way to heal sickness or freedom from disease. The group of ex-meditators hoped for, above all, inner values like fulfillment, development of consciousness, joy, and self-realization. When they got deeper into the organization, their ideology changed to less self-fulfilling values, to values that support the group. When they looked to learn yogic flying, 58% wanted to create world peace. There was a definite change in lifestyle. 91% of the people became vegetarians in some shape or form.
It doesn't involve any change in lifestyle. You don't change your diet or anything.
Well, according to this study, many people do. Some don't take medicine that isn't homeopathic. The German report showed that TMers often could not support their own course habits and would often leech off someone else. This was either from their parents or partners, but others took out credit cards. As for married couples, the report has stories that say their partners spent all their inheritance or sold all their furniture for more courses. One person said towards the end, you really had no thoughts of your own. Rounding, lectures, summaries, rounding, repetition. In the evening, there were new lectures, and before noon the next day, there was a summary. As far as I was concerned, that was brainwashing. The average initiate spent $20,000, or rather $83,853 today. The largest report of the 44 meditators was $131,000, which is about $500,000 today. While in the group, the initiates' views of money fundamentally changed. They saw money as less important, some citing teachings from the group. Many got employment in TM. Approximately 90% absorbed and accepted TM theory and ideology. 80% followed precisely the instructions of meditators of higher ranks, and about 75% lived in the pretend world of TM. That's in the words of the German study.
When you surrender yourself to the movementarians, you are guaranteed a perfect life of serenity, love, and loving serenity. Not a guarantee.
Loving serenity. It's about damn time.
In another meeting not long afterwards, I believe it was Billy Clayton that kind of jokingly suggested, in response to some brainstorming questions about how to revamp things, that have all the young rich people ask their parents to pay their own way in order to be able to work for the movement and give them status in return, which was how the 108 was formed.
Wait, I'm confused about the movie. So the cops knew that Internal Affairs was setting them up?
What are you talking about? There's nothing like that in there.
Well, you see, when I get bored, I make up my own movie.
One day, the Beatles awoke to a camera crew. Maharishi let loose a reality show while they slept. The squeaky clean guru image had began to vanish. Magazines and newspapers lampooning his wealth seemed to ring more and more true. Not a lot of Himalayan monks have helicopters and mansions. The Maharishi was promising a special to ABC, but not in all of his yogi mysticism could he ever deliver due to a contract dispute. Maharishi wanted 10% of what the Beatles were making. The Maharishi was the preamble to a rift of distrust and money problems that ruined the greatest band in the world. One has to ask, if Transcendental Meditation can't save the Beatles, what good is it to save the world? And Maharishi says we effortlessly return to the mantra.
Why isn't our low-protein gruel wearing down his resistance like all the others?
It doesn't wear down your resistance if you eat a whole month's supply. He even ate mine.
You gonna finish that, Pony?
Oh, Brian.
The things that were described were at that time is that what happens to people in groups is that they have poor diets. Well, not at the TM University, it was gourmet vegetarian food. They have sleep deprivation. Not at the TM University, you had to be in bed at 10 o'clock. At 10, because at 10 was the angel train. When you looked around, it just didn't seem like what was described in other groups. And I came to realize that what these techniques of sleep deprivation or poor diet help make you suggestible. And TM does it in a very simple way. The technique of TM is a hypnotic technique that increases suggestibility. So the result was the same, it was just achieved in a different way, and maybe a more acceptable way.
There was reports of no radio, no television, and no newspapers. The course participants are shut off from the outside world for months on end. People changed in TM, according to the report. In 28% of cases, body behavior was altered. The general posture was characterized as stiff, plump, sloppy, slow, and cramped. In 52% of cases, the voice had changed and was described as softer, inarticulate, slurred, solemn, and laborious.
That somebody like Tom Brady practices transcendental meditation.
People had mask-like faces or baby faces. In 30% of all cases, the handwriting had changed. It was wider and more drawn out, not as concentrated, erratic, and had many slips of the pen, and spelling was more incorrect. The German study found that there was less interest in TM-related things. They spoke of TM repeatedly, like a record. Some spoke in TM lingo. TMers were found to be withdrawn from family, withdrawn from their parents, more aggressive in the TM phase. They were found to have less friends. One spoke, "I was arrogant towards my parents because they weren't meditators." They were less interested in taking care of children, doing things together with their partner, having sex, just helping. Some people would just break down and cry. 73% of meditators were influenced strongly to very strongly in their exercising of free will or determination. People had problems making their own decisions. There was a substantial change in their eating, sleeping, and work habits. 58% of those in the study had their careers damaged. David Lynch says in his book, Catching the Big Fish, the thing about meditation is you become more and more you. Getting back to Rishikesh, Paul McCartney left. He had to manage the new corporation the band made called Apple Corps, and Maharishi says we effortlessly return to the mantra. There was a Stanford study with 574 subjects. 574 subjects revealed that the longer a person practiced TM, the more adverse mental effects were recorded. That 70% of subjects recorded mental disorders of one degree or another. This seems to reaffirm what the German report says about the large amount of adverse side effects. It would seem that people who are prone to anxiety are often prone to feel anxiety enhancement while doing transcendental meditation for long periods.
For some people, meditation is a good thing. There is some research, there's a few studies, one by the German government, a couple at the University of Kansas, one at Stanford Research Institute, that indicate about 40% of the people, up to 40% of the people who practice meditation develop what they call relaxation-induced anxiety. So rather than calming down and feeling peaceful, they have increased anxiety. They have obsessive thoughts. They may start violently shaking. They have the opposite effect. And I was sort of in that category. But by the time I was in that doing that long periods of meditation, I bought the idea that was being sold that all of these symptoms you were having were the release of things you've done wrong in your past. So initially it's called release of stress, and that's what's causing it. But as you advance, you realize that stress may have been from a few lifetimes ago. About 3 years after I had left, I was interviewed by somebody. I forgot the guy's name. And when I look at the video, too bad we probably could have shown it here. I call it spiritual Botox, because I'm a pretty animated person. And on this video, this is 3 years after I left, virtually nothing moves. My body doesn't move. My head doesn't move. Only thing that moves is my mouth. It's just a strange thing. So it's spiritual Botox.
You might notice that the editing in this video is kind of erratic. You know why that is? It's to keep things visually interesting. TMers don't move. They sit in one place and they once in a while bob their head up and down in agreement. It's like talking to a wax figure. Maharishi talks very slowly. It's almost impossible to get clips from him saying stuff because I'm afraid people might think I'm splicing his words together, so I find quotes from him instead. Maharishi at the end of his life straight up couldn't put sentences together without repeating himself, and I'm gonna splice this together for brevity. I'm sorry.
Today, to have this day, today is declared to be the day of stability. The day of stability. Today is the day for resolution. For us to make resolution. End of the constitution of the universe. Today is the day, the door of Badrinath, to the door of the constitution of the universe, to the door of the administrator of the universe, in the state of perfect silence, of eternal silence of Shiva, the ruler of the universe, the upholder of the constitution of the universe. Today is the day of opening the door of Badrinath, deep in the Himalayas. Our resolution of today, Akshaya Tritiya resolution, is a resolution which has been year after year, the same thing, year after year.
Maybe people find this hypnotic to listen to.
This experience of abstraction, samadhi. This is yoga samadhi, this is yoga samadhi. This is unfolding of the inner potential, which is field of all possibilities. So we say, unfold your cosmic potential in one little word. Cosmic potential, field of all possibilities. You'll be able to do anything. You'll be able to undo anything.
The vast majority of research on meditation has been done by the TM affiliated researchers. Yeah. You might not know their names, but they would have been professors when I was a student. So the idea that meditation is beneficial for everyone, a lot of it is based upon the research done on TM and the focusing on positive effects. And that's what people reference, these studies. People don't think of potential side effects. And I think that the TM movement specifically has been very good at producing lots of research and focusing on the positive things at the expense of the negative things because of their cosmology, their own religious beliefs.
We have anecdotal testimonies of long-term transcendental meditation. I recommend you listen to these people. Their stories matter, but all of this is contextual and shouldn't scare you from meditating. Just don't meditate for long periods unless you want to, because it's your body.
Never been a study showing that transcendental meditation has any harmful side effects in any way, shape, or form. And this is very important. And this is the reason why the National Institutes of Health has continued to fund research on TM over the past 25 years.
So TM used to have a sizable grant from the National Institute of Health totaling around $30 million. Despite this substantial funding, TM research saw a sharp decline post-2010. Scientists don't have much interest in TM as other meditations. The only people funding TM research is the David Lynch Foundation. But why? Why did science leave transcendental meditation behind? I don't know why. I know that TM handles data analysis like how a truck handles a baby carriage, and maybe that could factor in. According to survivor Mike Downey, since 1981, a full 92% of research on the TM website names at least one author with a known formal relationship with TM. He alleges that if TM finds any benefit, researchers are quick to look at TM as the cause rather than any other sort of outlier. People have told me that at TM, the really sick members are called space cadets. When the TM people do research, it has been alleged that they avoid unwell meditators when doing experiments.
Recordings of brain waves show an intensification of alpha waves associated with restful alertness.
Someone else approached me to be part of the brainwave research that Keith Wallace was conducting with increasing frequency. And I said, well, why do you want to research me? I'm only 16. And they said, well, you're functioning well. It's very important that we do the tests, the studies on people who are functioning well, because that's how we'll bring Maharishi's teaching into the world. And I said, well, don't you want to know what's happening with the people who are twitching? And they said, well, we're not testing. We're not including them in the studies.
Power vacuum of Brian Epstein open, the Beatles would try to make it on their own. Business brought about the torment of stuffy adulthood, and they took a laissez-faire attitude towards their projects.
We want to set up a system whereby people who just want to make a film about anything don't have to go on their knees in somebody's office, probably yours.
They founded Apple Corps, where anyone with an idea and a little charisma can make it. Maharishi was one of the first of these leeches. He wanted a movie deal where he would star alongside the Beatles. The Beatles wanted to produce instead. In turn, he instructed them to continue to meditate on the prospect. They would meditate for long periods of time.
That first day that Maharishi came, it was a Sunday, my one day to play. And we had to dress up in our Sunday best. The house was cleaned completely. And then we started waiting. And waiting. And waiting.
433 Harvard Boulevard was about to become more than just a family home.
I hear a car door slam, and Maharishi walked up to us. We gave him the flowers. He said, very good. And he walked into our home and walked into my life.
My parents understood Maharishi better than I did. He was just there like, an uncle or a second dad. Maharishi set my routine for going to sleep. He set my routine for meditation. The children's technique came out from my initiation. He was very careful about my schooling. So I have bachelor's cum laude, 2 to 3 master's degrees and a PhD as a result. For some strange reason, he put me into the news service as the director of the news service. All I had ever read of the news were comics. At 19, I was starting to connect, we should say, a little more, but no sex until after Maharishi had himself approached me for that. And then I thought maybe he wants me to have the experience. And so whatever Maharishi asked, I did. And I removed my blouse, and he had me remove the bra, and he looked at my breasts. And then Maharishi had me get on the bed with him and lay down with him. And I thought I was supposed to kiss or something. And he said, nothing on the lips. And then suddenly he moved his hands and put into my hand his penis. And he said, you adjust. Now, I'm a virgin. I'm Catholic. I have guilt. I was thinking, and my mom thought, that I would just simply become a nun because of my childhood background with a monk. So I had his penis in my hand, and I had no knowledge, no education, no experience. I had nothing to tell me. And he said, you adjust. I didn't know what that meant. One thing I left out is that my parents were 10 feet away in their bedroom. And had they gone back to the walk-in closet or where my father had his desk, they could look out the window and see everything that was going on. It was just easy to look right at Maharishi's windows, which of course you want to know what the master's doing. My mom had she initiated about 5,000 people. She opened up 15 centers in the United States. I had rejected him in my early years. And so this rejection was still affecting how he reacted with me. I didn't want to see him. I didn't wanted to be around him because I didn't know how he would respond. Nothing I did worked. Nothing I did satisfied him. He says, you've been meditating for so long and still you're not flying? Came out and said I had dry rot of the brain. And how dare I? And see, I'm still nervous talking about it. He exploded. It went on for 2 days to find out who was the spy, who just went on for 15 minutes in front of 75 people, who was subverting the news service and at a reduced price of only $10,000. Who was it that was making these problems? I told a few people and I lost them as friends. It was just that fast. And, I didn't, this was the only thing I knew.
I'm just furious when I hear the way the movement has treated you. It's just awful. It's awful. And I usually say that the women, people ask me, where are the other women? And I say the women who have it the most difficult are the women who are still in the movement. And you were in a kind of prison.
Yeah, it was.
It's terrible.
I couldn't get out of it. Coming to MIU, I thought I'd be able to get out of it. And it continued. And I've sort of surrendered now that I can't control. And I hold on to my cat, Azteca, and I hold on to my husband. And they give me the solace to be able to look forward and find God in all of creation, but not through the movement.
Professor Robert Gordon McCutcheon, a man who once bowed at the yogi's feet, tells the story of the time Maharishi sexually assaulted a woman. She was wearing a blouse. The Maharishi reached under it, dug about, and scolded her for giving him the temptation to do so.
To me and told me that she had been working with Maharishi on some project and had leaned over, and out of the blue, the guy had just stuck his hand down her blouse and took a long and lingering feel. And then, like it's her fault, he told her, don't wear low-cut blouses.
Now, Judith Baroque has a story about the Maharishi she recently published into a book about a love triangle.
I have a very good source that Maharishi has a daughter.
A lot of people speak of regret, not just monetarily, not just in time spent, but regret about not having children. By the time they left, it was too late, or they had weird feelings about sex. Maharishi had children, but he wasn't there for them. Maharishi may have had the ability to fly, but not the ability to be a father to his own children. And to me, that's a better measure of enlightenment in my mind. At Mia Farrow's birthday, she was given 50 gifts by the Maharishi. She was also given a paper crown. She was a queen. When she exited the stage, she told Maharishi's publicist that, "I'm so fucking mad. Have you ever seen anything like it? I feel like an idiot up on that stage with everyone bowing down to me." She raised a glass of champagne. "To the last night in this holy place. Ha! Maharishi ain't no saint. He made a pass at me when I was at his house before dinner." The publicist said, "How could you say something like that?" Mia replied, "Look, I'm no fucking dumbbell. I know a pass when I see one." She described how he felt up her hair. People tried to silence her, saying, "This is an honor to have a holy man feel your hair." According to Ned Wynn, friend of Mia, the true story is quite different. Maharishi grabbed her and wanted to get her to lie down with him. When Mia fled, she told her sister and was followed by a group of monks. She was afraid of these people. Ned Wynn doubted this story to Mia Farrow. She turned to him, telling him, "Don't you think I know when a man wants to fuck me?" I'm sure Maharishi didn't give Mia Farrow 50 presents, pay for her sightseeing tours, just because he wanted to be friends with her. None of this is why the remaining Beatles, John and George, left. That was another woman. There was many, but this was because of another woman. His Holiness, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, attempted to lay down with a teacher from New York named Rosalind Bonas. This is Rosalind next to Mia Farrow. When the remaining Beatles got word, they didn't believe it at first. They talked all night about it. When George, the spiritual one, had his doubts, John led the charge to the Maharishi's hut. The Beatles left, and the yogi screamed from the gates of the ashram as they hailed a taxi. The group didn't pay him any attention. And this was Magic Alex's opening. When the Beatles got out of Dodge, Alex was the one that hailed the taxi. He had to walk several miles to do this. The walk was worth it for Alex. He was able to get John Lennon all to himself. What made Magic Alex magical was his inventions. Although none of them worked, he tried to build a spaceship from 2 of the Beatles' car engines. He boasted of having the ability to create X-rays, invisible paint, and force fields. In reality, he was a former TV repairman. It cost the Beatles $300,000 for these science experiments, more than $6 million today. Robert J. Lifton's 8 Criteria of Thought Reform in TM, from the Lived Experiences of Gina Katena, Part 5, Sacred Science. Gina Katena says Maharishi's Science of Creative Intelligence, TM, the holy traditions of spiritual masters, the copyrighted ancient Ayurvedic methods are deemed infallible sources of truth. Questioning the veracity of these myths is akin to blasphemy for devoted TMers.
The mistake that is teaching.
Other people are making a mistake about teaching now.
That's up to them.
We thought there was more to him than there was, but he's human. And for a while we thought he wasn't, thought he was...
I was the spokesman. As usual, when the dirty work came, I actually had to be leader, whatever the scene was. When it came to the nitty-gritty, I had to do the speaking. And I said, we're leaving. Why? All that shit. And I said, well, if you're so cosmic, you'll know why. Because he was always intimating, and there were all these, his right-hand men intimating that he did miracles, And I was saying, you know why, He said, I don't know why, you must tell me. And I just kept saying, and he gave me a look like, I'll kill you, bastard. He gave me such a look, and I knew then when he looked at me, because I'd called his bluff, that if you know, you know all, cosmic conscious, that's what we're all here for. And I was a bit rough to him,
You're expecting too much from him.
I always do, I always expect too much. I always expect in my mother and don't get her, that's what it is, or some parents. I know that much.
The song Sexy Sadie is named after Maharishi. They changed the name at the last second. The song goes, what have you done? You've made a fool of everyone.
Who the fuck do you think you are? Oh, you cold.
When he left the compound, John Lennon got drunk. He would often get raving mad and would hit Cynthia, his then wife. The whole trip he was corresponding with Yoko Ono via letter and ignoring Cynthia. Blacked out, he admitted to Cynthia that he was unfaithful. Cynthia had no idea. She filed for divorce soon after. Back at Abbey Road, Lennon tore down the Maharishi's poster from his wall, cursing and stomping on it. Paul thought Lennon was a prude for getting so upset. The Maharishi didn't promise that he had special powers or that he was a celibate. So what's to get mad about? Which I'm glad he felt that way. But as an argument, really doesn't hold much water, considering the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's name was Brahamachari Mahesh Mahesh Yogi, which means that he was a celibate. The Beatles made it clear, though, it was a mistake. John Lennon said that Maharishi raped Mia Farrow. That's not true.
I thought it was a terrible we believe idea. In meditation, but not the Maharishi and his scene.
There's a lot of versions of the Maharishi song, one that runs 7 minutes. Sexy Sadie was the most takes out of any Beatles song. EMI wouldn't be able to release it until 2019. Mia Farrow took back the claim that Maharishi made a pass at her, only that some big hairy arms wrapped around her from behind and she ran away. Her sister Prudence Farrow is still in the movement. She doesn't make appearances often, for kind of obvious reasons. It's an open secret now, but it's muddled in hearsay and history. Yoko Ono showed Lennon heroin. It was one of the many reasons the band broke up a year later. August 20th, 1969 was when they were last in a recording studio altogether. Maybe John Lennon could have made better decisions if he had a support network, if he had a positive person in his life. That goes for all the Beatles. Ringo was a terrible alcoholic and admitted to beating his wife so hard he almost killed her. If they had a real spiritual advisor, that could have benefited them greatly. But no. Anyhow, John may have joked that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus, but Maharishi sure as hell tried. You can blame Yoko all you want, and you would be absolutely wrong. That's just ahistorical. The Beatles' finances were really what broke up the Beatles. All those funny papers started with the Maharishi. The Maharishi was like a bed bug who sold its dinner sleeping pills. The Beach Boys had recently had a falling out with their abusive father. He abused them emotionally, physically, and monetarily.
Make him sing with confidence. He needs it.
That doesn't make him sing with...
Well, I've protected you for 22 years, but I can't go on if you're not going to listen to an intelligent man. Again.
They propped Maharishi up after the Beatles dropped him down. Here's some old ads for the Maharishi's Beach Boy tour. They seeked out a father figure and gave Maharishi carte blanche. He wanted the Beach Boys to open for him. People walked out on the guru, as they should have. One day, Dennis Wilson picked up a couple hitchhikers on Mulholland Drive. He told the girls about his involvement with the Maharishi, and the girls told him that they also had a guru, a guy who recently came out of jail after 12 years. They told Dennis that their guru was really into the White Album, which the Beatles wrote in Rishikesh. Dennis Wilson would soon meet their guru. He called him the Wizard. The girls, or rather his family, called him Charlie. Okay, so this is Bob Roth. He works for the David Lynch Foundation.
Bob Roth.
He has 5 phones. Who needs 5 phones? I thought there was like 2 locations, but I think it's in one area, like it's a suite with like 2 desks. So that's why he brought this wireless landline over here. Why do you need 2 identical phones? Do you get confused about which is which? Bob, you have to dial a number. You don't just press the talk button. Do you know how to even work a phone, Bob? How much does Bob Roth make to answer phones? I have no idea what anyone really makes there. There's like 30 companies not disclosing their earnings. Is that another phone, Bob?
It's the one where you go in close on Marshy's face and then his hand.
You don't like the hand?
No, I love it. I think it was just a moment too long or something. I'm trying to figure out what it was.
Oh, by the way, which one's pink?
Almost got religious at the end.
I see. We don't want it to get religious or preachy or... You think it was the hands?
Maybe it was the hands. I don't know, Dave.
Well, I'm going to take that to heart, Bobby. And we're going to fix it.
Are you like getting really annoyed that I'm saying this?
When you are a painter and you paint a picture, it's your picture. Nobody comes in. The artist would, throw that person out in 2 seconds to say, I don't like this blue, or I don't like this, or we've gotten some reactions from some people and we want you to change this.
With a couple of positive research studies and celebrity endorsements, Transcendental meditation was a household name, enough for Maharishi to purchase a college in California in 1971 to start doing science of his own. Before too long, TM had hundreds of research studies. Fancy that. In 1972, Maharishi came up with the Science of Creative Intelligence, a collection of 33 lectures on tape describing Advaita Vedanta in a modern way. It was 1973, and David Lynch was making Eraserhead. He had to deal with divorce and homelessness. He just had a child. He was living on the set of the film he was making. He and Catherine Coulson, seen here with a log, learned Transcendental meditation. David Lynch got initiated by Charlie Lutz, who is this guy, and David Lynch was instantly transfixed. The way he described it was much like a religious experience. He never says this, but I get the feeling that this was what it was for him. He changed how he dressed, his anger changed, and he adopted new friend groups. He used his meditation to brainstorm. Without this, we wouldn't have some of the greatest films of all time. Again, links down below if you want to catch some fish yourself. It was a simple technique that had a great, profound effect on his life. Meditation is a positive tool, and I'm happy that he found it. At least, the meditation part. Ever since the early 70s, it would appear that David Lynch was a part of the clientele. Kurt Vonnegut interviewed Maharishi in 1970. He questioned this so-called guru. "What's your feelings about civil rights?" The Maharishi replied, "What are they?" And let me pause the video to tell you that the year is 1970, and Maharishi was fluent in English, and many looking to change their world had been martyred under recent memory. Vonnegut writes, civil rights were explained to him in terms of black people who were black, couldn't get nice houses or good educations or jobs. Maharishi replied that any oppressed person could rise by practicing transcendental meditation. He would automatically do his job better, and the economy would pay him more. Kurt Vonnegut continues that Maharishi hadn't wafted him to India in his meditation. Rather, Vonnegut said, he sent me back to New York, where I used to be a public relations man years and years ago. That's where I heard of other euphoric men talking of the human condition in terms of switches and radios and the fairness of the marketplace. They too thought it was ridiculous for people to be unhappy. Now, if I was to guess why Transcendental meditation is so successful, it's because, well, it comes from India. It's a deeply American religion. Transcendental meditation is a religion, there's no doubt about that, but it's also a mystic get-rich-quick scheme, designed by men in tan Brooks Brothers suits. If you pay enough, if you pray enough, your prayers will be answered.
If you're a toilet cleaner, cleaning latrines, that could be a horrible job, drudgery, a nightmare. But you start building up this inner happiness, creativity, and you're suddenly going to work in the most worst conditions, and you start seeing it differently. And maybe you get your boss to get some disinfectants, or maybe you invent a new brush or a new vacuum, and pretty soon you're kind of enthusiastic about it. And you're cleaning toilets faster and more shiny they are. The boss takes notice and comes to you and gives you a raise.
One of the most infuriating things about Transcendental meditation is its belief that chanting a word in one's head and hopping on a mat could somehow solve all the problems in the world.
Thoughts and prayers are with the victims.
Right, thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers.
Transcendental meditation states that jumping on your ass is the only true method of eliminating poverty or war or disease or famine or violence or what have you. That all the other methods of stopping this is not watering the root, it's watering the leaves. This takes people who are willing to give money to actual causes and has these people direct that money solely to the organization's butt-bouncing crusade. It's incredibly, painfully terrible because we're talking about millions of dollars, billions of dollars.
So when are you going to start, meditating?
Billions of dollars. Billions of dollars could have gone to AIDS research, to cancer research, to all these different things, wells in Africa. Instead, it goes to this.
Children going to schools where they have to sleep in bathtubs because of the bullets that could come through the walls. And 230 organizations, nonprofits submitted proposals, and the Crime Lab accepted 3. And David Lynch Foundation was one of those 3. And the first year, they gave us $300,000 to do a program in a few schools. Last year, they increased that to another $1 million. If you know education, that's a lot of money. The results were so significant. This year, the budget is for $2.6 million. And the preliminary indications are a significant reduction in arrests among meditating school kids during the summer months.
Correlation does not equal causation. Imagine how we could have helped these poor children who sleep in bathtubs to prevent stray bullets with $2.6 million. But no, other children got passed up for programs who would have at least addressed in some small part the systemic rot that they had to deal with every single day. But no, David Lynch knew better. David Lynch needed his prayers in schools, and TM needed to indoctrinate children into their mattress-bouncing crusade.
Your words, 600,000 young kids have learned to meditate, and a lot of it because of your words, and you are saving, no exaggeration, have saved thousands and thousands of lives. So when someone says to you...
Words are very powerful.
Pardon?
God created the world with words.
Yes.
You believe that the solution to political problems such as the 48 million hungry Americans would be a continuing process of personal and social enlightenment?
It would be a process of enlivening that field of unity in the midst of diversity and therefore getting peace. There wouldn't be anybody going to bed hungry. There still may be some differences in the amount of, money or, goods or cars or whatever, but it would be like Sam would have what he needed and what he was really happy with. Susie might have more, but that was just exactly what she liked and wanted.
At the end of the article, Vonnegut was frustrated by the whole ordeal. He shouted to the nearest crucifix, "You know why you're up there? It's your own fault. You should have practiced transcendental meditation, which is easy as pie. You would have also been a better carpenter." To promote this emerging field of science, Maharishi surrounded himself with major intellectuals in the scientific world. One such man that attended a TM seminar was Jonas Salk. Salk invented the cure for polio. It was one of the greatest medical discoveries of the 20th century. Jonas Salk would have made billions off of this. But Salk gave out his patent for free. Salk, by doing this, almost eradicated the disease from the planet. Can you imagine what Maharishi thought of Jonas Salk? Like, what a chump, right?
Who owns the patent on this vaccine? Well, the people, I would say. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?
Jonas Salk didn't stick around too long. Neither did Dr. Herbert Benson, who was studying the effects of meditation. Dr. Herbert Benson was never initiated in the group to keep purity in his research. He sold his book for around $5. You can find the relaxation response on archive.org for free. You just need to create an account. David Lynch said, "I met the Maharishi first time face-to-face in 1975 in Los Angeles. It was the spiritual regeneration movement in LA where I started meditating. Maharishi came to that center and it was his last visit, and I was there that night with 300 or 400 people. My friend had gotten a bunch of flowers to present to the Maharishi, and I handed him my flower, and for the briefest of moments our eyes met. And when the Maharishi looked into your eyes and he looks into yours, well, it's an incredible, incredible moment." In 1975, David Lynch and the log lady, Catherine Coulson, who was the assistant director of Eraserhead, went to the taping of the Merv Griffin show. Here he is. This taping was actually a turning point for the movement and cemented the Maharishi as a force to stay. What occurred after was called the Merv Wave by the organization. Time ran an article. The joke of the cover is that he's dressed to look like a Santa Claus. The thing about Santa is he's not real. Something TM was acutely aware of image-wise. They hide it in their marketing and never cite from the article because it quotes from the puja. What the Merv Wave was a wave. It did not last. They had to create something new to get people to stick around. In 1974, Transcendental Meditation got so successful, they bought Parsons College, completely remodeled it, and set up the new Maharishi International University. There, they created a community they hoped would become a utopia. This would be the central hub of the movement in America. In 1974, to make extra scratch, MIU started yogic flying courses. A Gallup poll of 4% of 1,500 participants stated that they learned transcendental meditation. TM tried to put this in schools in New Jersey, but it was deemed religious and therefore couldn't get government money. With the success of yogic flying courses and the inability to score cash from the government due to it being a religion, they chopped up everything Hindu they could find and sold it.
Students can major in physics, mathematics, business, philosophy.
In the late 70s, the Beach Boys learned to levitate. They wrote the MIU album. It was considered one of their worst. I think it's fine. Music Hound, on the other hand, gave it a woof. They gave it a woof. During the 70s, the organization took to briefcases to store their cash. They particularly liked to carry this as luggage on planes. There are whispers among former TMers of stories of mysterious briefcases filled with God money. You know, just like the movies. They go God knows where with these money briefcases for God knows what purposes. Are they avoiding taxes? I know for a fact they're not giving it to the poor.
Knowledge of all disciplines is intimately related to the student's personal experience of the full range of consciousness through the science of creative intelligence. SCI provides a transdisciplinary framework which locates principles of the evolution of consciousness, principles of creative intelligence at the basis of all disciplines.
So the first month was his theory about how you do right action. And the conclusion of it is that there is one person on earth
that everything he does is perfect and right, and that's Maharishi.
One of the skin boys, one of Maharishi's skin boys, was given a suitcase of money to sneak over the border. And he got arrested, actually. And he was in Spain. And I can't even imagine how terrified he was in jail in Spain, in a foreign country. And so the TM organization, Maharishi and his underlings, had to try to get him out of this conundrum. So they managed to negotiate with the Spanish government to pay them off so that they could get the skin boy out of jail. So they ended up paying off the Spanish government $50,000. And when they went to do this negotiation, who was sitting in the meeting but the president of Spain, Francisco Franco.
How you do right action.
Brian Josephson was, as brilliant minds often are, a bit off. At 22, he won the Nobel Prize for his work in quantum tunneling. He discovered the Josephson effect. He had an interest in telepathy, psychokinesis, and other paranormal phenomena. He was a Hindu and asked scientists to read holy texts during his lectures. Brian Josephson was a major figure in transcendental meditation. He proposed that superconductors emit themselves to higher frequencies when they are next to each other. So too with the field effects of meditation by those who do it in large groups. The Fundamental Physics Group was formed in the mid-70s at Berkeley to discuss the similarities between Eastern religion and quantum physics. Brian Josephson would join this group. Fridtjof Capra, a member of that group, wrote The Tao of Physics, which played a significant role in popularizing the dialogue between science and spirituality. The dialogue remains today on one side of the one. In the 1970s, a young John Hagelin got into a motorcycle crash. He survived his brush with death and found himself in a full-body cast at his private school's infirmary. A man was invited to the school to talk about the science of transcendental meditation. This is when John Hagelin got initiated in. John Hagelin studied physics at Harvard and in the mid-70s was at the top of his field. He theorized about a special type of unified field model called Flip SU5. He was a CERN researcher and dropped everything to teach at Maharishi's school in a cornfield in Iowa. He published a paper about the mystic qualities of meditation and about how it correlates with our universe in the 1980s. His former research partners started having troubles publishing their work because they previously worked with the guy. He won the Ig Nobel Prize, which is the Razzies of the academic world in the early 90s, for his experimental conclusion that 4,000 trained meditators caused an 18% decrease in violent crime in Washington, D.C. In the 1980s, John Lennon wrote the Rishikesh song, comparing TM to a pill you swallow, and once again reflecting on his suicidal ideations with meditation for long periods.
We'll give you all the answers, so swallow this, that's all you gotta do. Take 3 times a day after every meal.
I mention this because people often cite the Beatles for going to MIU or joining Transcendental Meditation, and there are people who are now in MIU dealing with the problems that the Beatles dealt with like 50-some years ago.
Still feel so suicidal. Something is wrong.
Oh, you have tuberculosis in both lungs.
Yes, sir.
Oh, God.
John Lennon, after imagining a world with no religion, became a fan of televangelists in the 1970s. Pat Robertson and Oral Roberts were one of his favorites. December 8th, 1980, Mark David Chapman shot John Lennon 4 times with a Spanish revolver. It was because of those comments he made about being bigger than Jesus. Or maybe he was just crazy. Robert J. Lifton's 8 Criteria of Thought Reform in TM from the Lived Experiences of Gina Catena, Part 6, Loading the Language. Gina Catena alleges that loaded language isolates a person from meaningful communication with others who don't use words in the same way.
But if you're in the TM movement and you're having bad feelings about the group, you're told that you need to meditate to get rid of that. And that's known as thought stopping. That's one of the techniques in the T of the bite model to shut down any reality testing. In the Moonies, we were taught to chant, crush Satan, crush Satan.
Gina Catena alleges the classic TM thought-stopping cliche is the attribution of any sadness or anxiety to unstressing. A person will discredit doubts by believing they are unstressing. She alleges that any thought-stopping cliche is taught during the TM checking procedure. If you're experiencing any roughness, pay it no mind and gently return awareness to the mantra. In that one sentence, TM teachings acknowledge that some individuals may experience anxiety or roughness in response to this meditation practice and simultaneously denies the validity of inner conflict by directing a person to return to their hypnotic mantra repetition. Many currently practicing TM and former TMers say they automatically return to the mantra even involuntarily during times of stress. And then there's the 7 states of consciousness, which are like double-speak terminology, and you got your consciousness, the unlimited reality, the collective consciousness, the lifting off the wave,
unbounded awareness,
consciousness-based, ultimate intelligent, manifestation, unmanifest, inner happiness, yogic flying, integrated TM Siddhi Siddha, advanced courses,
transcendental consciousness, or pure consciousness, or the state of being.
Self-referral, heaven on earth, stress, tension, strain, drop the body, program, invincible, pure consciousness. It's not a religion, it's a technique. It's never their own words. And you can tell it's never their own words. It's always someone else's words. It's always the group's words to describe their own experiences with God. Okay? And that's fucked up, right?
Your forearm, wrist, and back of hand should slant upward, parallel to the slant of the keyboard.
According to Robert J. Lifton, the language of the totalist environment is characterized by the thought-terminating cliche. The most far-reaching and complex of human problems are compressed into brief, highly selective, definitive-sounding phrases, easily memorized and easily expressed. They become the start and finish of any ideological analysis. For example, if someone asks how would meditation eliminate poverty, famine, suffering, and war, it would be common to hear the phrase,
as darkness disappears with the onset of light.
It sounds nice and explains the world in a black and a white way to sell a product. Maharishi wasn't interested in explaining nasty geopolitics or deconstructing why the rich has so much and the poor only have children. The language of TM is rooted away from the problems of systems, rather catch-all phrases used to blame individuals. When things are wrong, Maharishi says, the world is as we are, meaning the problems never become the group, but rather the individual's perception of the group. TM often simplifies the complex into platitudes to evoke emotional responses in the potential inductee. The nature of the universe is to grow.
Mind is always moving in the direction of greater happiness.
The mind and nature is much more complicated, but this regressive view is appealing. The world is often minimized as a flower or a tree or a rainbow. Complex thoughts, definite sounding phrases easily expressed. Heaven on earth, heaven on earth, heaven on earth. A person who just went through a divorce or a move or had their dog die might find themselves in a place of uncertainty and may say that heaven on earth sounds like a pretty good deal. The loading of language can be used to stop critical thinking. Maharishi says, speak the sweet truth. If you say something unbefitting of the group, one is asked to speak the sweet truth. This limits the range of acceptable thought. Transcendental meditation uses a translation of the Bhagavad Gita that states, never entertain negativity, never denounce anyone. This is bullshit. The real passage reads, may what's been studied by us be filled with brilliance of understanding leading to knowledge. May it not give rise to hostility due to lack of understanding. Peace, peace, peace. This is different from never entertain negativity, never denounce anyone. It has been said to me that this hopping is a byproduct of a translation error. that flying really means doing things with ease. Much like quantum physics, the qualities of its language is unknown to many, so charlatans are at the ready to twist it to their purposes. It's hard to keep away from George Orwell. A major plot point in 1984 surrounds O'Brien, a totalitarian overseer manipulating language to the point protagonist Winston believes that he can fly like a soap bubble.
The law of gravity is nonsense. No such law exists.
In an effort to make life-saving surgeries look dangerous, Maharishi printed out stacks of studies on medical complications and proposed meditation instead. This is still on their website. I'm willing to bet that they have no alternative to all this life-saving surgeries, but they used to propose as a full replacement of what they call Western treatment with Ayurvedic herbal supplements. Ayurvedic herbal supplements are, by their admission, not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So that means any illness whatsoever. Here's one of the worst offenders. It's this guy. His name is Deepak Chopra, who left the movement after a power struggle. His belief system and influence is still purportedly there. Chopra has likened aging to a learned behavior. Tony Nader came on the scene with Deepak. Deepak was the second in command for a while after he established his own following by celebrities such as Michael Jackson, Oprah, Mike Myers. I don't know why I don't know. Mike Myers. Today, Transcendental Meditation believes atoms vibrate, and if the energy from the vibrations of the atoms get confused by negative thoughts, then this can result in cancer in our bodies.
So we are affected by the energies, we are affected by the thoughts. So if there's a deep confusion in the mind, that also results into, cancer in our body.
Okay. So from my understanding of Transcendental Meditation's approach to health, it's that it does not endorse treating cancer with herbal supplements alone.
There is no one, big anti-cancer herb or anti-cancer fruit or anti-cancer plant. It is an actual myth.
TM doesn't stray away from giving advice about detecting cancer. They see it as a force called agony to be the thing that causes cancer, which has some relation to fire. They state that they can detect cancer prior to other doctors through listening to your pulse, like in your wrist.
So even with all this development and modern technology and equipments, that is not the solution. The solution is, again, we have the supreme solutions in Ayurveda. We have the best solutions in Ayurveda. The age-old technologies, they stand the test of time. So
Transcendental Meditation is quackery, in my opinion. William Jarvis, president of the National Council Against Health Fraud, described this listening to your pulse as a diagnosis as a variety of palm reading. A TM doctor refused the practice to be tested in a blinded protocol to eliminate bias, on the grounds that a blinded experiment would eliminate the most crucial component of the experiment, which is consciousness. According to Bronte Baxter, alienated flower child people gave up their dreams of love and family to follow their guru's advice, believing they were serving their enlightenment and the highest social good. My best friend, intensely in love with her husband, was divorced by him when the monastic program started. He became a celibate, while my friend tried to live as a nun with her broken heart. Within months, she developed cancer, dying a couple of years later. She forewent Western treatment to pursue an alternative healing system, Ayurvedic Indian's ancient world medicine, which was then being revived by Maharishi. Her physician was Deepak Chopra, at the time TM's poster boy and its leading Ayurvedic physician. My friend Sharon withered away and died, but Ayurveda grew in popularity. David Flint was another patient. He tried to treat his cancer with sound waves. He spent $10,000. When he inevitably died, his wife tried to sue Chopra. Chopra, in my opinion, got away with it. David Flint signed some sort of waiver. Chopra has described the AIDS virus as emitting a sound that lures the DNA to its destruction. HIV can be treated, according to Chopra, with Ayurvedic primordial sound therapy. He is worth $80 million. George Harrison called Maharishi sometime in the 80s. At that point, the Ayurveda health fad was skyrocketing his business to billions. The Maharishi declined Harrison's call. Maharishi was so successful, he said that he didn't need him anymore. In 1991, physicians used Maharishi's Vedic approach to health to cure AIDS. Dr. Leslie Davis and Roger Chalmers sold a miracle cure for AIDS patients at $500 some a month, or roughly $1,100 now. One patient died. When the pills were analyzed, they contained fungi and the type of bacteria usually found in feces, which is an apt description for Leslie Davis and Roger Chalmers, being that they remind me of the type of bacteria usually found in feces. I'm unaware of what became of Leslie Davis, however, Roger Chalmers seemingly remains with the company. Apparently, the Transcendental Meditation still finds common ideological ground even after he sold an herbal remedy for AIDS. I say this because a summary of scientific research on Transcendental Meditation by Chalmers remains to be used on TM's UK website. It's not hard to find. Roger Chalmers' bibliography on TM research is the largest amount of TM research published, other than this big blue book filled with unpublished TM research. 77% of studies listed in Roger Chalmers' bibliography lists at least one individual connected with the TM organization. JAMA, or the Journal of American Medical Association, found that 20% of around 200 Ayurvedic supplements tested contained detectable traces of arsenic, mercury, and lead. A 2015 study of users in the United States found elevated blood lead levels in 40% of those tested. You know the phrase, "don't drink the Kool-Aid"? The poison is not a metaphor in this situation. Transcendental Meditation claims perfect health on the Global Country of World Peace website, copyrighted 2023. TM, as an organization, no longer outwardly rejects Western medicine. They neither outwardly reject orthodox psychology, but they still have books that do. They still sell publications that call for a ban on medicine, but these books were written like 20 years ago. It has been alleged to me that there is still a culture of older TMers who are much more prone to reject medicine. I have heard reports of people not wanting to stand in houses that aren't facing east out of fear that demons may enter. Reports as early as 2015 still show a skepticism towards things such as vaccination. Just 47% of 178 students at a private Fairfield elementary school had records showing that they received all required shots. It was the lowest vaccination rate in all of Iowa. This shows a fundamental distrust towards medicine, according to Joseph Weber, who wrote an ethnography on the Fairfield area. David Orm Johnson, a former professor of psychology at the Maharishi School, pointed to studies that TM reduces psychiatric illness and decreases depression. It's often claimed that meditation is a panacea for perfect health. Bobby Roth did speak on the organization's stance on medicine, saying, "Do whatever your doctor tells you. If they want to come off medicine, we say, do whatever your doctor advises. We don't advise medically." An internal WikiLeaks memo contradicts Bob Roth, stating, "We are not going to take help from medical doctors, as medical professionals give poison. So don't engage any medical doctors for anything, absolutely whatever it is, even if they're in our movement family." Joseph Weber, in the book Transcendental Meditation in America, reports of 2 dead who walked in front of the same train tracks, treating their mental illness with meditation. One was in 1991. His name was Mark. Another was 2008. Her name was Nicole. It is worth noting that suicide rates are average in the Fairfield area. However, the question still lingers. Does the fear of medical doctors giving poison prevent people from treating mental and physical illnesses, and therefore create structures where people get hurt? Does magical thinking cost lives? With so many secrets, are there cover-ups in the Transcendental Meditation organization? Kay Drule, who was once a part of Transcendental Meditation, said that students were told not to take schizophrenia medications. This led to mental breakdowns, which leads us to the 2004 murder of Levi Butler. The death of Levi Butler was a complete display of TM's house of cards collapsing. There was ample warning, signs of magical thinking, treatment of severe mental disorders with benign treatment, and a possible cover-up. According to Shivender Sem, a doctor prescribed me what he called Ayurvedic treatment. As a Hindu, I was already familiar with it. The quote was taken from Shivender's book. He uses different names of the school and the people involved, but it's pretty safe to say it's inspired by his experiences. Sem had been hospitalized between 9 and 12 times for psychiatric problems, including schizophrenia. When he went to the TM doctor, he was given herbal supplements for his discomfort. Sem threatened to kill a fellow student by bashing the student's head into a sink and then stomping on him while he was on the ground. No one seemed to report this, even though around 4 people saw it. In Fairfield, meditation and this hopping is seen as some sort of protective shield for their students. Even on their website, they cited it as a way to create a safer environment at the Maharishi University. Now, Shivendra Sem stabbed another student using a ballpoint pen. This was during a lecture on world peace. He did this in front of the whole classroom. Luckily for the other student, he was okay. He used his hand to block the blow to his neck, and then landed on his face instead. The staff didn't report it to the police or ask for any ambulance. Instead, the student drove himself to the hospital while he was bleeding from his face. This is really weird to me. It almost sounds like a cover-up. Once at the hospital, the student got 7 stitches. The reason Sem stabbed another student was that, according to Sem, there was a microchip planted in his brain. Sem was off his medication for quite some time, instead using herbal supplements to cure his microchip. After stabbing the man, Sem switched on a dime after getting instructions from a voice in his head, and apologized immediately. One of the instructors, Dr. Boothby, pulled him aside, informing him he was using an improper technique when completing his TM exercises, and then he called the dean, Dean Joel Weinson. Sem was rightfully expelled, but not before Sem was given a tall glass of almond milk to balance him out. On Weinson's desk lay a paring knife. The dean left Sem in the room unattended. The door was unlocked. Sem, feeling that he had yet to complete his mission, went into the dining hall. Along the way, the dean happened to see Sem and followed him. The dean let him mingle with other people. Then, in front of 20 to 30-some people, Sem stabbed Levi Butler, an 18-year-old man enjoying a vegetarian dinner. Sem stabbed him once in the back, and then Sem continued to stab him 3 more times until he was restrained by the students. Sem was arrested, and later that day, Sem pleaded insanity, and the judge agreed. In The Science of Being and the Art of Living, a handbook in every MIU student's bag, reads, Maharishi says, let us now, however, consider the failure of modern psychology to live up to its purpose. Let us not dwell on the slow progress of the development of the science of psychology, and let us not remark that the science of psychology is yet in its infant state of development. Let us be more constructive and bring to modern psychology the key to its long-cherished aim to glorify man's life in all fields of existence. Levi Butler was stabbed until the knife broke. Levi was 18. The news report said that he was 19. He was not. He was about to turn 19. Levi didn't die instantly. This took about an hour to occur. In high school, Levi founded a philosophy club. He was on the debate team. He liked fencing, martial arts. Levi mattered. He mattered to someone, and now he's dead. Transcendental meditation is so anti-vaccine, they created a biological event. There was a school vacation in India, and a man got measles, and no one had their measles shot. I think it's worth repeating. We are not going to take help from medical doctors, as medical professionals give poison. So don't engage any medical doctors for anything, absolutely whatever it is, even if they're in our movement family. If this is the true stance of the organization, that would mean that Transcendental Meditation doesn't care of the opinion of doctors, only as a means to promote Transcendental Meditation. The American Heart Association says TM is good for your heart. The only value the American Heart Association has is that a doctor is promoting TM. Not that the doctor sees good health benefits in their product. They wouldn't engage with them otherwise.
From the very beginning of our construction project, the infinite organizing power of pure knowledge organized nature to allow us to raise our golden dome in the winter season when no one said it could be done. On 5 occasions in the depths of winter, the temperature rose 40 to 50 degrees in a day when we needed warmth to pour and dry the cement. The cement dried in 1 day on each occasion.
In terms of the anti-medical, my first child was born at, all 3 of my children were at home. My first was born at home, literally with no medical care. The fact that she's normal and I'm okay is a luck.
Yeah.
I had a hemorrhage, it was untreated. There was no blood pressure taken, no fetal heart rate, no, I mean.
You were lucky. She was lucky.
Yeah, I was young and healthy. And, I was going to say something else about that. I was so in the mindset.
In 1981, after her husband was nearly shot to death, Nancy Reagan started consulting with an astrologer for advice. Virtually every major decision was cleared in advance with a woman in San Francisco who drew up horoscopes to make certain that the planets were favorable in alignment for Ronald Reagan's presidency. In 1984, Andy Kaufman died from lung cancer. He used non-TM alternative medicines to treat it. He was a TMer who was excommunicated from the movement. They could never tame Andy. Jim Carrey learned TM shortly after a mental breakdown during the production of Man on the Moon. He speaks positive of it. Mike Myers was originally going to play another character in Austin Powers based off of the Maharishi. This was scrapped for its own feature film called The Love Guru.
Deepak Chopra!
It's a hockey movie.
Everything that I've read would suggest that enlightenment is lightening up.
As great as you are, I don't need to become the next Deepak Chopra.
The guy treated cancer with sound.
The mind follow its natural instinct towards greater happiness. See all this beautiful nature.
Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you?
The Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and his science of creative intelligence most likely inspired the Force in Star Wars. Yoda, the small, high-pitched, giggling sage, is a stand-in for the yogi. In the next section, we talk about a psychotherapist who used his power over some to bring about undue influence. The problem is not psychotherapy, but rather individuals misusing power, and I just wanted to clarify that. From the mid-'80s to the early 90s, Brian Wilson was under the care of Eugene Landy, who charged $430,000 and a quarter of his publishing royalties. Landy surveilled Wilson 24 hours a day. He cut off him from his family, friends, and his children. He was controlling and made him eat food off the floor. Brian Wilson attempted suicide in his care. Maharishi says, "You see, to meditate and transcend is one way to achieve cosmic consciousness. The path of surrender is another way. The path of surrender starts by tuning the mind with the mind of the master. Tuning the mind with the mind of the master means whatever he likes, I begin to like. I begin to forego my liking. If he wants me to go that way, I go that way. And having gone halfway, if he wants me to turn, I turn. And again, he wants me to go that way, I go that way. If he wants me to return, I return. Nothing of my will. Everything is his will." Sometime in the 80s, Ingegard Engfeldt, TM adherent, inherited her father's fortune. She soon became one of the richest women in southern Sweden. With this, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi saw dollar signs. She was deeply committed and was persuaded by the Maharishi to create a cassette manufacturing plant called Track. She invested all her money in the project. Ultimately, the quality of the cassettes were terrible, and a recently installed tax made it hard to compete. Nevertheless, she had an agreement with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who wanted his lectures recorded and sold. When this agreement wasn't met, he cut her off and just hung up the phone. She had nothing left. In protest, she lit herself on fire. She was 35.
Relisberg, when she was there, she was lured in to create a huge cassette firm called Track, and she was put to people that couldn't do their proper work, and finally, when all her money, she built a huge big factory in Sweden, and they were in daily contact, Maharishi and her, and finally, when everything turned out that these cassettes were useless, hunted down by what we call the kronofogde. That means the one that put down the feet and say, "Come up with the money." She was talking with him on the phone, and then suddenly he just hung up. He didn't bother at all. She was just a chewing gum that you can adjust in your mouth and spit out. And this is what happened to her. And that crushed her heart completely. And she was one of the richest people in southern Sweden. And she had followed him blindly, as I also did, for the time being. That meant that she has lost everything, and she has lost everything. But then when she finally decided to end her life, she lost her life due to Maharishi not walking his talk. And she burned herself to death of hundreds of millions of krona. She was ruined.
According to survivor Gina Catena in her essay Program Pedophilia, many TM parents leave their children for months on end while parents attend advanced programs. Children are often left with a hodgepodge of caretakers. Child abandonment for enlightenment is deemed to magically benefit the entire family. These are typical cult dynamics. The higher mission, as defined by the charismatic leader Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, supersedes all. Catena also adds in a private conversation that the degree of abandonment of kids is often dependent upon the parents' financial situation. The wealthier have personal nannies. Middle income pay for group childcare. Others do a co-op, rotating turns caring for kids. And some just plain leave their kids unsupervised. I knew of some who just locked their home, leaving unattended babies in a playpen. True believers can justify anything for the deemed highest cause. This testimony surrounds a woman who left the movement in the early 90s. While the counterculture looked to Eastern religion, away from the ugly, abrasive stranglehold of Western religion, the Transcendental meditation program began to look more and more like what they were trying to escape from. Fairfield is no picnic now, but it was at its worst in the 80s. It was the era of excess, and Maharishi started manufacturing everything he could possibly hawk. He made sure he had a monopoly in Fairfield. He had vigilance committees make sure that people were only buying TM products. TMers reported on each other and wrote down their license plates of parked cars in front of competing New Age businesses. Then they found themselves banned from the Golden Dome and shunned from TM society. I've been told that excommunication was essentially death. They had no way to get a job because they had no proper resume. They had one shot at liberation, and Maharishi was the ticket. Manette Transnet founder John Knapp was the first to put the mantras online. He recalls isolation from society, tightly controlled behavior, and a lack of dissent. He even recalls he even once participated in a book burning. Books that were full of stress were torched, including the novel Love Story. Why Maharishi would be reading romantic novels is anyone's guess. Mine is that around that same time, Maharishi had nightly liaisons with nuns. I have been told that as time went on, the more transcendental meditation got lenient, but purports from the 80s are really bad. In 1983, 7,000 meditators, the square root of 1% of the world, hopped about. None of them levitated. The rest of the world, undeterred by this, continued its wars and slaughter. The TMers huddled together in the freezing Iowa cold to take pictures.
There's no room for criticism, doubt, or anxiety. This community is full of unity. There's no time to entertain negativity when positivity comes so easy.
During this time, the Illustrated Weekly of India followed the building of a single ashram. The workers speak of a very different man than the humble, giggling guru we see on these old TV programs. While breaking land permits, Maharishi had his workers work dirt cheap. His workers lacked any medical care, and their food was said not to be fit for animals. Malnutrition and dehydration was common. Every year of construction, 4 to 6 children died on average because of dehydration. This occurred during 1984 to 1987. We don't know how many children died, but we do know some names and when they died. Sexual abuse was reported by a boy as well in the ashram. We have the name of the abused. I don't know what became of that person. The person who oversaw this project was Ganesh Varma. All his workers had to eat was rice. So when the bugs got into the rice, people naturally complained. Upon showing him the food, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi got agitated and said that they put bugs in their own food supply to defame him. The workers then began to strike. However, Mahesh waited it out until they were half-starved and needed the money. They misjudged him for a humble monk, not knowing that he was a billionaire. The hungry workers didn't have the leverage for the strike. Around the same time, Mahesh couldn't secure rice for his workers. Maharishi was buying up real estate half a world away. It bears repeating, most of TM's money is not in meditation, it's in real estate. You know the Eyes Wide Shut house? The one with the orgy? You know Batman's house? Same one. It used to be owned by some Rothschilds. When his employees needed rice without bugs in it, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi owned the Eyes Wide Shut orgy house and didn't even live in it. Much like similar gangsters before him, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's luck caught up with him by the way of the tax authorities. Maharishi then spent the rest of his years in Vlodrop, Holland. The orgy house would become the center of the Natural Law Party in Britain. The Natural Law Party wasn't as much of a political movement as an advertisement and a call for lower taxes.
The message is you can succeed in life by taking natural law courses, which can cost thousands of dollars. In fact, the Natural Law Party says its election platform cannot succeed unless thousands of Canadians take those courses. Until the campaign started, the usual methods of promoting their meditation and yogic flying courses weren't working.
We've been trying that for the past 20 years and nobody's listening, so we felt that the best way to reach the Canadian people is through this democratic way of politics. And
Elections Canada has officially registered the Natural Law Party, giving it access to the list containing the names and addresses of every Canadian voter. Television and radio are also required to set aside free and paid advertising time. Only the three major parties are running more candidates than Natural Law, and its campaign spending limit is fourth highest, $8.5 million.
Natural Law had funding unlike other third parties, so they got on the ballot and casted a wider net. Former Democratic presidential contender Marianne Williamson was once part of the Natural Law Party. The King of America ran for president 3 times, never getting 1% of the vote. Dead fucking last every time. This was in 1992, 1996, and 2000, one after another.
Us to take genes and genetic traits from insects, viruses, humans, fish, and splice them into our crops. Why? Because the flounder, for example, is a remarkable fish. It can live in sub-freezing water because it has a natural blood antifreeze protein. Okay, if you can teach a tomato to produce enough flounder blood, the tomato becomes frost-resistant and more profitable. What a fabulous application of human ingenuity, unless you or your children are allergic to fish.
In 1992, he lost to this guy who literally had a warrant on him. Watching these debates are crazy. No one challenges the King of America. Why would they? How would you know that this guy was part of a semi-secret society? I've read the Natural Law Party book. There's no mention of a one-world government or anything like wackadoodle like that. There's mentions of like yogic flying, but it doesn't go out of its way to tell you what it means. There's some stuff about limiting military intervention and a brief mentions of TM products, but they don't even mention what natural law means. A natural law means an impersonal God. Maharishi was caught with his pants down, and his ego was bruised because of it. It took decades to mend these ties with the Beatles. It took up until the 1990s for George Harrison to regain his friendship. He played for the Natural Law Party at a charity event. Back in the 90s, former magician Doug Henning talked about doing away with the Constitution of Canada and replacing it with yogic flying.
He says the laws of nature can be practically applied to government, and he gives the example of national defense.
We have to create a coherent consciousness that will disallow the birth of any enemy. This is called in physics the Meissner's effect. A coherent system, through supergravity, no other energy fields can enter it.
Doug Henning was a multiple award-winning magician. He had his own show on Broadway, discovered Transcendental meditation, and sold his magician tools for a chance to have the ability to fly. After not picking up any momentum in the political world, the Maharishi told him of an idea. The Maharishi had just come back from Disneyland. He wanted to build a theme park, but this one would be different because it would be a theme park built on ancient Vedic science. According to the Illustrated Weekly of India, the team organization planned the park centerpiece to be a pink pavilion that would levitate 15 or 20 feet above the lake, supported simply by water, as well as a ride on a celestial chariot, similar to Indra's fabled carriage. Carriage would have 11 horses and have the capacity to carry 120 people at a time. Yogic powers would eventually cause the chariot to grow smaller and smaller, as it would fly through Veda land, eventually landing on a rose petal and transporting its passengers deeper and deeper in the finer levels of reality. They mentioned a golf course, a water park, a map of India the size of 4 football fields. Was it a scam to get donations for an impossible project? I don't think for Doug. I've heard that Doug Henning was a really nice guy. He died from liver cancer after being told to use herbal supplements to cure it. He was 52.
Today is a very great and historic day. When Professor Tony Nader, MD, PhD, is being honored with his weight in gold for his supreme scientific discovery that the human physiology is cosmic.
See Dr. Nader rising off the ground. Observe the arrow approaching the balance point. Still, a little more gold is needed. As the scale is coming into balance now, we'll start adding gold in 1 kilo increments, a total up to 76 kilos. See the arrow approaching the balance point? We're just waiting for that moment to rejoice that intelligence which appears as physiology. Now, Jai Gurudev. Now is the time to rejoice that intelligence which appears as physiology. To celebrate with some waves of appreciation from the golden flute.
Maharishi tried to build the largest tower in the world in 1999. He wanted a 108-story tall building in South America. There was allegations of bribery in the government, which led the government to cancel the project. They sold the land for millions more than they purchased it, and they moved the project to Texas in 2000. But you can't have the tallest building in the world right next to an airport, so they sold that land back to the state government, making millions, where they got more land to sell. The Dallas Morning News revealed that a key advisor involved in the land sale also worked for the Transcendental Meditation Organization. The FBI got involved, which launched an investigation involving local politicians and officials. As for Veda land, they probably sold the land, but I don't know for how much. They once in a while built stuff on the land they buy, but They often just speculate on it and sell it. Robert J. Lifton's 8 Criteria of Thought Reform in TM from the Lived Experiences of Gina Catena, Part 7, Doctrine over Person. Gina Catena states, the TM mindset, the science of creative intelligence, and Maharishi's Ayurveda are the only accepted sources of truth and life principles. Maharishi taught us the 33-lesson course of SEI encompasses all the laws of nature. She also alleged that there is a limited acceptable variations of individual thought or expression. Maharishi taught us that doubting him could jeopardize our chances to enlightenment. He threatened us, if you doubt, the doubt will manifest. Never doubt. We were afraid to question. She also alleges that many who leave the TM organization do not tell old friends or family members of their decision to live outside the TM paradigm after moving away. Current true believers, who are called TBs, attempt to reconvert us back to TM. The thoughtful person who left the TM program is deemed misguided at best and evil at worst. I am officially a lost cause now. She also alleges that we once also believed that those who spoke against TM were lost in ignorance or erroneously directing their unstressing. We thought if only they would meditate again, their anxiety would leave and they would see the light again. She also alleges inner conflict between doctrine and personal thinking, as described by Lifton, may be the cause of TM-related psychosis and suicides. Since most of those who committed suicide did not leave notes behind, we cannot know for certainty. She also alleges that when inner thoughts conflict with the deemed to be ultimate truth, one's community and everything one loves, an existential crisis may ensue. The TM solution to this experience of intense unstressing would be to return to meditate and calm oneself. These silences disquieting through the returning up to transcendence or a self-induced inner trance.
Have you ever stopped for a moment and looked at yourself through the eyes of the ultimate observer?
Okay, in the next section, we reference the act of what TM calls witnessing, which is a method to see oneself from a different viewpoint because one is literally one with everything. Ms. Catena alleges that the end goal of transcendental meditation is to be literally, not figuratively, literally one with everything. If one is to ever experience such a state, modern psychology would call this psychosis. She also alleges that witnessing in TM refers to the state of observing oneself as if an outsider because one is grounded in the absolute, God, and experiences even their own existence as cosmically inconsequential. The doctrine and inner experiences is more important than any individual. The ultimate goal of TM's transcendence is cosmic consciousness. She also alleges that TM teaches that in cosmic consciousness, CC, one observes even themselves as if from the outside 24 hours per day. This constant separation of self is the goal. The individuality leaves and all creation is ultimately connected as one is the highest state of unity consciousness, UC. And UC, the ultimate diminution of personhood would be exalted as individual personhood disappears. Unity consciousness is the extreme valuation of doctrine over person, since personal identity ceases.
Plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center.
The problem with Father Hawley was not just one crazy priest, but it was the problem of the hierarchy of the church and the way they dealt with them.
Running with curiosity, she ran after it.
George Harrison just died. I know he was a friend of yours. How do you deal when someone you love or like is gone?
It's human nature to like those whom you like, and when they go, it's natural to be sad about them, but it is inevitable. It's inevitable. When I found Transcendental...
In 2001, TM started selling themselves as an anti-terrorist deterrent. I don't really have much to add to that. I just think that's just kind of funny.
Давайте зайдем на медитацию.
In 2004, John Hagelin was part of a documentary, What the Bleep Do We Know? It ends with a woman throwing her prescription medication in a trash bin after being enlightened. It was funded by the Ramtha cult. Ramtha is a 35,000-year-old warrior who conquered Atlantis at age 14. He is channeled by a woman by the name of Jay-Z Knight. Jay-Z, as her first name is Judith, and her middle name is Zebra. Jay-Z Knight met the Lemurian warrior in her kitchen after making a pyramid paper crown on her head. Ramtha is also a racist and a homophobe. I don't know about Jay-Z Knight, though. She's just channeling the dude. Transcendental meditation isn't reliant on people being in the in-group, so it oftentimes dips its toe in a lot of groups.
What is this, a crossover episode?
And Dr. John Hagelin is one of the world's greatest quantum physicists. So he said, how about forming the David Lynch Foundation? And we came up with a name. The David Lynch Foundation for Consciousness-Based Education and World Peace.
In this clip, David Lynch divulges that a person from the Transcendental Meditation Organization, King of America John Hagelin, had the idea to start a front group so he can get people to donate to Transcendental Meditation. And isn't that a conflict of interest? These donations are to the tune of millions, according to their tax filings. Why do you need donations? You could just give away meditation online or not charge for it. You're a billion-dollar organization. Either way, it's a stupid idea for a charity. It's like McDonald's asking someone to start a charity so they can have someone donate hamburger meat. Also, David, I'm almost kind of mad. You go through all the trouble of setting up a front group, and you have a documentary crew film yourself on the phone telling people that you created a front group. Like, TM is good at this stuff, right? Like being secret? Like, most people don't know that their favorite film director hangs out with a bunch of kings, and for good reason. February 4th, 2008, which just so happened to be a day prior to the death of the Maharishi, John Lennon's estate and Paul McCartney okayed the song Across the Universe to be transmitted by NASA out to the outer reaches of the solar system. In Across the Universe's lyrics, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's master is spoken of. The phrase Ja Guru Dev was relayed. No one answered back. The death of the yogi in 2008 brought about the post-charismatic phase of the organization. David Lynch could have been the leader, in my mind. He definitely has the charisma. But David Lynch didn't want to be a king. He became a doctor instead. It was tough from the start for David Lynch. What David Lynch was tasked to do was the impossible. John Hagelin asked David Lynch to start an organization to get Hindu prayer in government to fulfill his utopic vision. David Lynch really started promoting this in 2005, but gained traction by the endorsement of the surviving Beatles as well as many other celebrities. Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr would put on a benefit in 2012. Survivor of the organization, John Knapp, would protest this event with his own press conference. He desperately didn't want this in schools. He was contacted by the organization. He backed down. This was a huge victory for the David Lynch Foundation. Lynch put together a tour and a film soon afterwards.
So after that, David Lynch returned and was very busy founding the David Lynch Foundation to spread transcendental meditation. And he was using his connections in the film industry to gather celebrities and raise money to do this. So while my father is becoming increasingly crippled, and my parents are buying more and more yagyas, and my father is full of all of these thousands of dollars of gemstones to do these mystical things for him, David Lynch Foundation runs the first Change Begins Within concert in Radio City Music Hall, April 2009, with Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, Mike Love of the Beach Boys, Donovan was there, a number of other stars. And my father died a few weeks after this, a very ugly, painful, prolonged, terrible, terrible death. And he had all of those amulets on his neck. His room was surrounded by his certificates for various spiritual achievements. And all of the money he had donated, plus another $80,000 in credit cards that we had to settle as a family. I just kept thinking how that could have helped my children with education.
In 2009, TM lawyer Will Goldstein, on behalf of the David Lynch Foundation, threatened defamation on The Guardian. One of the people that they employed wrote an article on TM, and they called it a cult.
And there was another young woman who's the daughter of one of my good friends, about the same age as my daughter, who coincidentally had a history of sexual molestation with her former stepfather. However, the school required her to sit for a board of these suited men who would interrogated her about this prior sexual molestation to determine if she was too impure to attend their school. After this questioning, they decided that her impurity would taint the rest of the school. She was not allowed in. She's now 39 years old. She still calls me Aunt Gina. And she said that that experience, that interrogation, was more traumatic than were the multiple sexual molestations by her former stepfather.
I'm quoting Catena in a private conversation. TM wanted to make their own presentation at the Commonwealth Club after mine. Some TM leadership attended and heckled me. The Commonwealth Club denied their request. Then the TM org threatened to sue the Commonwealth Club for not giving equal time unless they either allowed them to present or took mine down. The Commonwealth Club just didn't want to bother with the hassle, so they took mine down. Just know that it took 10 years for people to have the ability to hear Gina's testimony. So she was literally canceled.
When you are a painter and you paint a picture, it's your picture.
In order to just make a movie on TM, David Civic King had to deal with major threats of defamation from the group. It was tough to find a distributor in America. I don't even know if he ever did. Civic King doesn't have much of a career in film, even though he is an incredible director. Donna Cleveland wrote an article in 2013 about the problems of suicide in the Fairfield area. She says that people's determination to attain a perfect life or enlightenment has led to a culture of idealism and often a lack of acknowledgement of what's really happening. She goes on to say that many people in pursuit of Maharishi's vision of peace, bliss, and enlightenment have felt shame when dealing with mental and physical problems. I have heard people make offhand comments such as, "You only get cancer if you want cancer," or "modern medicine is poison." Dr. Scott Terry, who's a Fairfield psychologist, and he's quoted in the article stating, "Meditation is not a panacea to life's problems." He said, "I tell my clients to meditate like I tell them to exercise. It's a tool, and it's about what you do with it. If you misuse a tool, it can be more destructive than helpful." There's a huge amount of suicidal behavior in Fairfield, he said. People are in complete denial of what's going on. Terry said he runs across a variety of troubling attitudes regarding suicide. He's seen people mistake manic behavior, sometimes characterized by a person thinking he or she is acting as God, as enlightenment. When such situations result in a suicide, he said families often won't acknowledge the death as a suicide, but as an act of an enlightened being. David Lynch dedicated an entire segment of his book, Catching the Big Fish, to speak against psychology, making you less creative. Robert J. Lifton, 8 Criteria of Thought Reform in TM from the Lived Experiences of Gina Catena, Part 8, Dispensing of Existence. Gina Catena also alleges that those who have not learned TM are considered to live lives of ignorance. To have a life in ignorance is akin to a fate worse than death. Many TM devotees and youth, including myself decades ago, fear to live outside their global community protected shell. They cannot meaningfully connect with outsiders. She also alleges that once learning TM, according to the higher teachings, one's good karma outweighs his or her bad karma. A person has received the key to enlightenment or admission to the spiritual elite. Outsiders are actively recruited to join the elite group. Once initiated, a person is accepted as one of us. Thus, upon earning this point of entry, initiation, a person is instantly accepted as spiritually elite. She also alleges that leaving the TM group is not restricted to changing geographic locale. A person can leave the community but continue in the mindset, whether involved with a TM center or living quietly as a TM yogi. However, to disavow the teachings is to choose a life of ignorance. She also alleges that when still in the group and the group member moved away, we rarely thought about them. It was assumed that they had chosen a less valuable life. We stayed in touch with an occasional friend, hoping for their eventual return. We were preoccupied with our TM-centered endeavors, building heaven on earth, our taste of utopia, or recruiting to Maharishi's university. We are community-centric in our creativity, lifestyle, and goals. She also alleges that, unlike converts who later leave, those raised in the group maintains connections, as the group is our family. If we speak our mind, our history will reject us. We keep dark secrets to protect our family and loved ones. She also alleges that some folks return years after having left the community because they struggled in the real world. The community jokingly refers to this latter return phenomenon as the rubber band effect. This plays upon the Maharishi effect, wherein large groups of meditators support global peace and crime reduction.
Simple. It wasn't like, oh, and then, way out and beyond. It was like, you're tired. That's why you fell asleep. Go with it. Nothing to fight,
I think people had a lot of misunderstandings about Maharishi. The press made it into him to be many different things.
I mean, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi got a full-page obituary in the New York Times at the age of 90. He allegedly had a state funeral in which Hindu nationalists attended. He was a multi-billionaire. And this can't be said enough. There were people who thought they could fly who took herbal supplements for perfect health. The consequences of that is unknown. It would stand to reason that Maharishi had a bigger body count than someone like Charles Manson, just by selling herbal supplements to people with magical thinking. That's something I can't prove personally, but that stands to reason. As of publishing this, the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi has had 20 alleged known sexual improprieties whilst claiming to be a celibate and leading a movement of celibates. Most of the known women he slept with were nuns.
He's in the building!
Oprah Winfrey, like many daytime talk shows, often promote unsubstantiated mumbo-jumbo. In 2007, Oprah promoted the book The Secret, which popularized the laws of attraction in the modern lexicon. The laws of attraction is not a scientific law, it's a pseudo-scientific idea from a religious movement called New Thought, which inspired prosperity gospel. But it's common in TM spaces. The laws of attraction states that if you think positive thoughts, positive things will come. This is true for the poor too, meaning people deserve their poverty because they don't want health care for their cancer enough, You're
going to immediately say, I didn't attract the car accident. I didn't attract this particular client. I didn't particularly attract the debt. I didn't attract whatever it happens to be that you're complaining about. And I'm here to be a little bit in your face and to say, yes, you did attract it.
There's no doubt in my mind that this is his favorite part of his job. And this opinion is not uncommon. Many Americans believe that the rich acquired their wealth because God wanted them to be wealthy. They were chosen and you were not. Similarly, I have heard testimonies stating Maharishi deserved this palace, or this luxury hotel, or this castle because he was close to God and others aren't. Maharishi's wealth isn't a bug, it's a feature. Science of Creative Intelligence is just a Hindu version of prosperity gospel, New Thought, American capitalism as a religion. New Thought, which this philosophy in which The Secret surrounds, has its origins in animal magnetism, or what is now called stage hypnotism. If you heard of the phrase mesmerized, that comes from Franz Mesmer, who philosophized that the world was made of invisible magnets. This led to a very American philosophy that one attracts things one wants if one wills them hard enough. Magnets developed into an impersonal God, guiding forces of the universe by your will, and that's essentially the secret.
I had drawn the color purple into my life. I didn't know Steven Spielberg. I didn't know Quincy Jones, that the way you think creates reality for yourself. there are other factors going on. So it's not everything, but you really can change your own reality based on the way that you think.
Oprah is worth roughly $3 billion today. Oprah saw the benefits of TM, like Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz did a whole show on TM. A 2014 British Medical Journal study found that less than half the claims on the Dr. Oz show has some evidence, and only a third were believable. He is a terrible, absolute quack who gave people who believe in homosexuality to heterosexuality conversion therapy, faith healing, and alternative medicine airtime.
These healing services are legendary in Northeast Ohio and across the country. Over the years, News Channel 5 has reported one story of healing after another, and 2 Cleveland area women talk about their own miraculous recovery.
The doctor couldn't believe it. He says, I never get to tell my patients this, but you're clean, that your mass is gone.
Oprah had taught her whole staff to do TM on her dime, meaning she was probably interested in its peace-giving qualities. She toured Fairfield in 2011. Oprah's goal here was most likely not just to promote TM and her own spiritual beliefs, but to reduce flack. There had been major pushback from detractors about the methods of how TM operates.
This is amazing. I cannot believe I'm in Fairfield, Iowa.
Afterwards, she asked to see the barracks.
I have to say, this looks like barracks.
Sometimes they randomly cut to some high contrast stock footage, like a sunny day in Iowa, or a non sequitur of a blissful autumn stream. We have Oprah here, no doubt a great interviewer. Just by looking at her face, it would seem that she would have some questions. I wonder what they are. Can a person who is isolated by barbed wire with neither English language fluency nor outside access inquire for assistance or file a complaint? Why is this an undisclosed location? Why is this so secret? Why is your organization so secret? Why are there barracks?
Right? This looks like you went to a military camp or something.
Why do they need to live such a regimented existence?
Told the security is for their protection, since their presence here generates a lot of curiosity.
This security is for their protection. Okay, I would ask if I could film someone telling me that. Then I would ask logically if barbed wire kept people out. Would barbed wire also keep people in? How much are the monks paid? How much are people donating? What's your biggest donation? Can I see your finances?
They spend 8 hours each day here meditating.
Do they have any, psychotic breaks? Could that bring about suicidal ideations? Has anyone gotten hurt? What kind of headspace are people in meditating for 8 hours every single day, saying a word in their head over and over and over and over to try to stop an oncoming nuclear war? They have volleyball courts, but do they have the ability to go on outings? Like Walmart or anything? What happens when they get depressed? They're meditators, they meditate. Why do they need around-the-clock guards?
That the way you think creates reality for yourself.
On a piece of literature distributed in 2018, you find that the highest category of yagyas was actually going for $100,000, then tapering down to a mere $2,500.
Today on Invincible America Avenue on 170th Street in Fairfield, Iowa, this enclosure full of Hindu monks no longer exists. But in 2014, 2 years after Oprah flew her private jet to, I can't believe I'm in Fairfield, Iowa, Riku Basu from the Des Moines Registry questioned Bill Goldstein, Dean of the Global Country of World Peace. They're not coming here to be tourists, to see New York or socialize. If they need something, they'll tell us and we'll take care of it. We have a medical facility. It's a form of confinement, he acknowledged when pressed. It's a form of taking away their freedoms, and you balance that. Maybe in America, that's the preeminent issue. In my experience, that's not so important. They want to be with their brothers. There were around 1,000 of these monks there at the time. They were systemically imprisoned. They were kept in a remote location and almost kept off the census. 1,000 people, individuals, human beings just unrecognized by the government. It took them a year to just get basic necessities as winter coats. In Iowa, separate fundraising efforts by this purported multi-billion-dollar organization was made to purchase these coats. In my opinion, the overall scheme was to herd these monks into an enclosed gated community like cattle, so TM had a stream of cheap immigrant revenue. These monks were paraded before prospective clients, telling them that these exotic foreigners could cure society's ills by chanting and hopping around and doing these prayer ceremonies. Again, these ceremonies can go upwards of thousands. I've heard more. According to reports by High India, kids of the program enrolled at the tender age of 5 years were rarely provided education beyond the 5th standard. After investigation by the newspaper, it came to light that these Vedic pundits, that's what they call them, I'm just calling them monks because it's shorthand, were brought to the US from India and were kept in makeshift trailer homes to be guarded by round-the-clock guards. They were contracted $50 compensation while in the US and another $150 in India. This $150 is not given on a monthly basis to the family of the pundits, but rather is considered as bond money. That's 75 cents an hour. And that $150 were held over their head lest they misbehave, I believe. One article states that all the monks, contrary to the allegations, reside in modern, fully heated, and air-conditioned, comfortable modular homes with an indoor and outdoor athletic facility and a large organic vegetarian kitchen and cafeteria, along with meditation halls, classrooms, and Vedic performance halls. I believe that's like theaters or something. TM maintained that all of them were adults when they came to America. According to a 2014 report by the Times of India, 5% of 2,600 monks that were brought to Fairfield went missing. According to reporting by the Business Standard, no missing persons report had been filed by the global country of world peace. I'm guessing they eventually filed some reports. I don't know. There are reports amongst those in the Fairfield community of people hailing passerbyers of cars outside the compound screaming, "Chicago, $2." I cannot comprehend what it was like for Ajit Pandey when he and thousands of others came to some foreign country speaking another language and only to find themselves incarcerated by some slender tan-suited former hippie. I cannot begin to imagine what it must have been like to be herded into a gated community of barracks where Ajit was made to chant and hop on his butt all day. I can't understand why any of this went on and why this went on for so long. People are quick to blame the monks for hopping the fence. They claim they wanted to find their piece of the American dream. But in their defense, humans aren't cattle. I can't comprehend any of this. What I can comprehend is the response to this. The monks rioted. The police came over after a dispute surrounding an elder, which was taken away to go back to India. The monks got rowdy and security had to call the sheriff. The sheriff arrived and they surrounded his car and broke off his mirrors and lights. The monks knocked off the entrance of the compound, and this was the beginning of the end. It was a great embarrassment for the leaders of the superhuman crew. So after too long, the world peace experiment was over, at least by this method in America. But for Ajit Pandey and 162 others, the American experiment was about to begin. When he was dropped off in front of Chicago O'Hare Airport on a below-freezing day, he missed his flight. Did Ajit want to make it big in America? Well, very likely. But we also have to mention that most of these monks were uneducated beyond the 5th grade, didn't speak a word of English, so it wouldn't surprise me if many of them didn't make their flight because of this confusion. From what I understand, someone just dropped them off at the entrance. Whether Ajit knowingly or unknowingly missed his flight is not known to me. In fact, not anything is known about Ajit until he appeared again in Georgia, 2,220 miles away, working 15-hour days, 7 days a week for housing at Big Brother 2 Food Mart. He was living his own American dream, with reportedly no proper food sanitation or security provided at the back room where Ajit slept after work. On January 24th, after closing time, Ajit was murdered The security camera shows Ajit struck with fear, unable to move from the doorway. The man pistol whips Ajit, causing him to fall out of frame. The robber points his gun out of frame at Ajit. Without sound, we can see the man's arm recoil as he murders him. The murderer takes the money from the register and some cigarettes. The murderer steps over the body and through the door and into the night. According to High India, the owner of the property, Pultur Roy, and Guru Chand lied to the press and police about Ajit. That he was just a friend, that he was volunteering in exchange for a place to sleep. This is not out of character for Pultur Roy, as years later he was a co-conspirator in a $10 million wire fraud scheme surrounding food stamps. Ajit was the sole breadwinner of his family. This includes his widowed mother and 2 minor siblings. How this affected them, I don't know. Despite working for 15-hour days at a supermarket and meditating for 8 hours daily at TM, he had nothing to his name. The family was too poor to send his body back home. I don't know what became of his body. I don't know who to contact to ask these questions. Ajit Pandey was one of likely hundreds of refugees from the global country of world peace. Garesh Varma is one of the most powerful men in the organization. According to TM, he is a doctor and a celibate monk. But may I add that Garesh is an alleged rapist. The woman he allegedly raped was raped repeatedly from 1999 to 2013, but couldn't do anything about it. She was a teacher. Garesh was in charge of a school she worked for. Garesh allegedly filmed these acts and blackmailed her. When the police investigated, the tapes could not be found. According to the victim, Varma demanded that she supply him with other women at the school, but she refused. She then lost her job, allegedly because of this refusal. Then, when she filed a rape claim, a group of thugs came into her home. The thugs told her to drop the charges. She didn't. They threw acid at her. It was only after pleading to the authorities, including a suicide attempt via self-immolation, Varma was sent to jail. But there was no videotapes, and Varma was ultimately acquitted of all charges. The guy next to Narendra Modi is Ray Dalio, major funder of the David Lynch Foundation, like big, like huge, biggest hedge fund in America. He owns Bridgewater. This is going to surprise you, but Bridgewater has been likened to a cult. It's a cauldron of fear and intimidation. According to the Human Rights and Opportunities Board of Connecticut, Dalio denies this. His associate John Cassidy says the word cult clearly has connotations that don't apply. They can quit at any moment. In my opinion, Ray Dalio utilizes his ties to the David Lynch Foundation, that's him in the audience, to gain access to people like Narendra Modi. He's about to give $50,000. And therefore he gains ties to the burgeoning economic powerhouse that is India. I mean, that's just an opinion statement. I could never prove that. Well, we're already miles off subject. The heir to the Stanley Tools empire is a king too. Bow to King Stanley. Like, I know this. I can't unknow this. I've been to his LinkedIn page. Every time I pick up a fucking screwdriver, I'm gonna be like, oh, Stanley Tools. He a king made that. Stephen Collins played a priest on the TV show Seventh Heaven. He was a national co-director of the Committee for Stress-Free Schools, which advocating practicing TM in schools and funded TM research in schools. This was a front group. The Committee for Stress-Free Schools was a front for the David Lynch Foundation, which is a front for Transcendental Meditation. Transcendental Meditation has transcended front groups. The same time as Garesh Varma's rape arrest, Stephen Collins stepped down from his position. Collins admitted to sexually abusing 3 children. He admitted this first to his therapist, and then Katie Couric. So this is a fact, not an allegation. It appears that there was no charges filed, and he is free and lives in Iowa. Great. Katie Couric would host future David Lynch Foundation charity drives. Couric seems to be also a TMer. 3 years later, in 2017, Russell Simmons, who was on the advisory board of the David Lynch Foundation for several years, had to step down because of 3 rape allegations. He denied these. Around the same time, Russell Brand started promoting TM, where Bobby Roth would regularly appear on his program. Brand is now facing 2 rape allegations, one of which was a child during the time of the rape, as well as 2 sexual assault allegations.
Every single culture of humankind that had a written history had techniques that would interrupt everyday thinking. And then we repeated our studies of transcendental meditation of people who were using other techniques, and we found there was a common set of changes opposite to the fight or flight response that we call the relaxation response. Transcendental meditation is a wonderful way to evoke the relaxation response. It's as good as any other technique. But from our studies, we found it was not unique. It's as good as any other technique. It's as good as any other technique. It's as good as any other technique.
I doubt that their goal is to alleviate what most people would refer to as stress, even if it were. Research states that there needs to be more trials for things such as like treatment for anxiety, and it seems that transcendental meditation is comparable with other kinds of relaxation therapies in reducing anxiety, which is, good. TM does not outperform other meditation techniques. So while it may reduce negative emotions like trait anxiety, neuroticism, and enhance aspects like learning, memory, and self-actualization, it falls short in addressing negative personality traits, overall stress reduction, and improvements in attention. According to Bobby Roth, the Journal of Hypertension concluded that TM is the only meditation technique shown to lower blood pressure. And nope.
Blood pressure more effectively than most hypertensive drugs, and much more effectively than other forms of relaxation.
The overall evidence supports that TM modestly lowers BP. It is not certain whether it is truly superior to other meditation techniques in terms of BP lowering, because there are few head-to-head studies. That's in the words of the American Heart Association. When TM continued to sell themselves on this, the American Heart Association Executive Director of Communications wrote, "Unfortunately, we have found that some in the media and many in the TM community have tried to overstate our findings to promote their own agendas." TM says that it can help with PTSD, and it may. There's little research for it from TM, but it may. Dr. Herbert Benson set up an organization to get meditation for free for veterans with stress. He got a $60 million grant from the government. So if you're into that, I linked that down below. Some trauma victims have reported flashbacks to me. Others have reported success to me. Just consult with a doctor if you're worried about it. I'm not one. But saying I like meditation for PTSD doesn't mean I want TM in places like battered women's shelters. Does TM help transcend autism, like TM says? I don't know what that means, but there's no studies for autism. I mean, there's one YouTube video of a kid, and goddamn, I'm happy for the kid. But that's not how this works. But some desperate person, as desperate people often do, will look to anecdotes out of desperation. And what worries me is that they may find themselves in the fold. Try it. It's for free down below. People may ask, will it help me quit smoking, biting my nails? I need to cut down on my drinking. All my answers are links down below if you want to give it a shot. However, I believe the systems of TM shouldn't be near alcoholics or drug addicts. Definitely not a substitute. Seek proper counseling for that type of stuff. How about ADHD? Can this help? From what I know, there is one study which has no control group. It is comprised of 10 children and was conducted in an online journal by a TM teacher. The goal, in my opinion, is marketing rather than research. TM science is almost always biased and almost always small in their sample size. They're looking for quantity rather than quality. This allows them to gish gallop. Try arguing with a fire hose. I have never seen TM research measuring things wrong with TM, only the potential to say good things about TM. I never compare it to the relaxation response, to my knowledge, and if that's not speaking volumes, I would not be able to scream loud enough, and I desperately want to scream. So where does Transcendental Meditation go forward? Most likely towards Hindutva and other right-wing organizations. Transcendental Meditation's base has been associated with hippies since the Beatles, but this was never to the liking of Maharishi, who was ideologically trying to impart orthodox Hindu ideas. What has been seen in recent years with India TM is its outreach towards Hindu supremacist groups, And that's where I see Transcendental Meditation going forward. Transcendental Meditation goes where power goes, and while most of this was kept secret to maintain its Western audience, TM, I believe, can't navigate that tightrope. Transcendental Meditation will eventually have to cut the cord. I don't believe Fairfield, Iowa will exist as Maharishiville in the next 10 years. In lieu of his own charisma, Tony Nader is seeking out the charisma of other leaders. But most recently, the self-professed successor of the Satya Sai Baba cult got his doctorate at the Global Country of World Peace. He wants to put together yogic flyers. This is the next big project. No doubt they will need more money to fulfill this goal. Will the RSS be doing yogic flying? I really doubt it. But I think that's the ambition of Tony Nader, at least what he's gambling on. There is this other cult leader. You may have heard of him. His name is Donald Trump. He, of course, has ties to Modi. Ivanka Trump takes Transcendental Meditation very seriously. I'm not sure if she levitates, but it wouldn't surprise me.
The peace-creating experts are here. It just needs putting it together. So let's get going on this. I know this thing's gonna work. Let's work together and make it happen.
In January of 2002, Maharishi proposed that for $250 million, the world's problems could be solved by establishing a permanent community with 10,000 monks, hopping and meditating. A former member of TM donated $150 million to go to India. Maharishi ultimately admitted to him that he didn't know if this was all going to work. As of writing this, David Lynch is currently undergoing a custody battle for his kid. He is on oxygen for emphysema. He has trouble navigating without it. It has been reported that he will no longer make movies as he can't get around. And with the mounting legal pressure, this seems to be the end of David Lynch's foundation. A foundation that took up the creative output of the last 20 years of Lynch's life. David Lynch only really made 2 non-TM collaborations in that time, one being Inland Empire, and 2, Twin Peaks: The Return. As for how much he spent, I get the feeling that he was one of the biggest spenders. I have heard stories where people sold furniture to pay for more courses, so no amount will actually surprise me. David Lynch was and is a great artist. His art has had an immensely positive effect on my life, and I must say it's really sad to see all this. In an interview with Howard Stern, Paul McCartney remembers about how while recording, he stopped to open the front door to a man who called himself Jesus Christ. He did this because he thought he could be.
It was Beatlemania. Some guy shows up at your house who calls himself Jesus.
Yeah.
And instead of calling the police, you invite him into the studio.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's crazy?
It didn't seem crazy at the time.
And I think that's the cosmic why. Why the Maharishi? The Beatles. Why the Beatles? Could have been anybody. Why is Levi Butler dead? Because the Maharishi existed, and I think it could have been anybody.
And I just went out to the door and said, yeah, what do you want? And he's sort of just a kind of bearded guy. And he said, I'm Jesus. I said, you better come in.
Really?
You want a cup of tea?
Why are people jumping up and down in a room in Iowa for world peace? My answer is, and I'm sad to say, I think it could have been anybody. Maharishi wasn't chosen because he was special or anything. Maharishi was probably the first Indian man the Beatles ever saw outside a movie set.
I must lie down. That's better.
So I guess the real question might be about the nature of evil and why people do what they do. Why did Maharishi build what he built? Well, Maharishi was human. He was far, far from the Jesus figure in our time, like the hippies thought he was. He was human, and humans are petty, ugly, mean, and like power. They like power over people that they think are lesser than them. But that's not a motivator in of itself. What I think set the wheels in motion was something else. Maharishi once said he never suffered a day in his life. I don't believe that. No one would ever say that unless they did. They truly did. I believe Maharishi probably suffered plenty, unjustly.
Pleased to meet you. Hope you guessed my name.
British East India Company.
Maharishi was a byproduct of British colonialism. Now we know Jack and about the Maharishi's past because he renounced everything to become a monk. But the fact he never talked about his past makes me believe that it was painful. And this is no wonder. He grew up as a second-class citizen in his own country. Maharishi most likely held resentment. I would. I believe Maharishi's world was unjustly fractured. When he got power, he attempted to reorder it in the worldview that was shaped by those who shaped him. His goal, like the empire that once governed him, was to take over the world. Rather than British imperialism, it will be corrected by what he perceived to be the true science, the holy Vedic texts. The Hindu epics have kings too, and they're called the Maharajas. From this, he expanded his will to power. Maharishi would build palaces and install kings and structures and settlements. He did this one prayer at a time. With each prayer sold, his worldview was reaffirmed, and he built the world in the image of himself. Maharishi was a human. He saw power, he wanted that power, he obtained that power, and he used that power on people he thought was lesser than him. Maharishi preyed on people's ignorance, and from this scheme he bought monuments to himself. He developed massive real estate portfolios, allowing him to amass even more wealth. He persuaded people that these chants weren't religious and rather scientific, and good things would happen if they chanted these chants. And people, some of them, believed him. When people started to lose interest, he invented more elaborate things for people to buy. Transcendental meditation itself, like most of its adherents' stories, starts with a trauma.
I sat upon the shore fishing, with the arid plain behind me. Shall I at least set my lands in order?
There's a guy on my course who was in a wheelchair. I don't remember why. He may have had some spinal issue, but he was in a wheelchair. And he was so convinced that he was going to be able to finally move. And, it just didn't happen.
I mean, if nobody's going to listen to Mia Farrow and John Lennon and George Harrison, when they told their story, if you read my paper, that's why John left. He rips Maharishi's poster from the wall, walks all over it. He gave interviews that Maharishi was hitting on the women. Mia Farrow went on record as that Maharishi, people tried to talk her out of it. And she said, I know a past from a puja.
Because the children who are more enlightened than we ever were, even though I was born in a family of yogis, I still don't consider myself anywhere near where some people are and where the upcoming generations are. They need to know what to do. If the guru says, don't tell anybody, go out and tell everybody.
Is whether we call it a donation or a payment to ask for money for the teachings is absolutely forbidden in every way. The Dundee sannyasins, when they go out to beg, they will very often put first of all, they don't accept money, they only accept food and things like that. They're not even allowed to touch money. So that very much bothers them, very much bothers them.
So I had donated all this money to help build a permanent 10,000 group of India that Mahesh had always been saying would bring world peace. So I believe in 2000, Neil Patterson showed me some pictures of some buildings they had built. They were missing roofs, and he showed me the pictures of the groups of people, and they moved the different people around in the picture to try to make me believe they had more people than they had. And I looked at that and I thought, what a joke. And then another time I was sitting with Mahesh and we were talking about getting different groups together and there were a lot of discussions and I said, Maharishi, why don't we just put a 10,000 group in place. I've donated enough money to support a group like that in India. And with 10,000 people, you've been saying there would be world peace right away. And he looked at me and he said, Earl, I have no idea if a 10,000 group would create world peace.
You have to wonder why they're spending so much on new campuses when the conditions in existing campuses are so appalling. You'll have seen these slides, I'm sure, from last year. And the thing is that this year, these are more recent slides, it hasn't gotten any better.
Crime in Fairfield, there shouldn't be any crime in Iowa, there shouldn't be any crime in the entire Midwest. Crime rate in Fairfield is considerably higher than the national average across all communities in America, from the largest to the smallest. Although at 32 crimes per 1,000 residents is not among the communities with the very highest crime rates, the chance of becoming a victim of either violent or property crime in Fairfield is 1 in 31. Based on FBI crime data, Fairfield is not one of the safest communities in America. Relative to Iowa, Fairfield has a crime rate that is higher than 94% of the state's cities and towns of all sizes.
And Maharishi was sitting there. Of course, my eyes were like saucers, and they were amateur Sanskritists. So there he was, being told what the Rig Veda said. He was asking questions, as I mentioned before. Oh, and what does that mean? He was hoovering up all the information he could get. And then at our next meeting, he was disclosing what had come to him. He was disclosing to us how lucky we were to hear the fruit of his cognition.
To me, absolutely jumps off the page from everything you've presented here is a pattern that appears to have repeated itself over and over again and looks like a business model. And that is raise lots and lots and lots and lots of money for various presumably altruistic purposes, park that money in real estate. And it doesn't matter if the real estate turns a quote unquote profit when you resell it because you got the money for free.
It can be hazardous to your health. There have been a number of people that were deeply involved with TM that sued TM, and Maharishi chose to settle out of court with them. They claimed, and I met some of them, that you can meditate too much, that if you follow all the teachings of TM and you go through their exercises, you can become a kind of meditation junkie, and ultimately you can't control your floating states.
Similar to me to Scientology, where people have jumped out of windows or died, and the cult says, yeah, they'll be reincarnated again. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal.
Oh, people thought they could really fly. They jumped out of windows. One person who was a very beloved person in the organization has this like deformed arm from when she jumped out of the window.
That's veterans, and that's doctors and nurses and healthcare providers.
Okay, if you can teach a tomato to produce enough flounder blood,